My name is Sophia, and at 32 years old, I never expected my husband Ryan's family to try to kill me. Not literally, anyway. When we arrived at his parents' annual family gathering, I was hopeful this time would be different. I brought my own allergen-free dessert as usual, given my severe peanut allergy. When I saw my father-in-law Thomas dumping my food in the trash, I was confused. Hours later, I was fighting for my life in the ER. Before I continue this shocking story about my in-laws' betrayal, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt invalidated by family members. Trust me, you'll want to hear how I finally stood up for myself. Living with a severe peanut allergy has shaped my entire life. Since I was diagnosed at 3 years old after a terrifying reaction to a peanut butter cookie, my parents transformed our home into a peanut-free sanctuary. Growing up, I carried EpiPens everywhere, wore medical alert bracelets, and became hypervigilant about reading food labels. My childhood memories include multiple emergency room visits, terrified parents, and concerned doctors advising greater caution. The worst incident happened when I was 12. At a birthday party, I accidentally ate a brownie that contained peanut oil. Within minutes, my throat began closing, hives erupted across my skin, and my breathing became dangerously labored. By the time the ambulance arrived, my blood pressure had plummeted, and I was slipping into unconsciousness. The doctors later told my parents I came frighteningly close to death. After 3 days in the hospital, I developed a new level of anxiety about food prepared by others. Throughout my teens and 20s, I learned to navigate social situations where food was central. I'd eat before attending parties, bring my own safe snacks, and became skilled at deflecting well-meaning but potentially dangerous offers of food. Most people were understanding once I explained the severity of my allergy, though I occasionally encountered skepticism. "Is it really that serious?" or "a little bit won't hurt you" became phrases I dreaded hearing. Then I met Ryan 4 years ago at a work conference. He was charming, intelligent, and extraordinarily considerate about my allergy from the moment I mentioned it. On our first date, he researched peanut-free restaurants and called ahead to alert the kitchen. I fell hard for his thoughtfulness as much as his warm smile and quick wit. After 18 months of dating, he proposed during a weekend getaway, and I joyfully accepted. Meeting Ryan's family should have been a happy milestone. His father, Thomas, a successful businessman, seemed polite if somewhat distant during our first encounter. He asked practical questions about my allergy, but appeared to accept my explanations. His mother, Deborah, however, was a different story. Behind her picture-perfect smile, I sensed immediate skepticism. "You know, people didn't have all these fancy allergies when I was growing up," she remarked during our first dinner together. "We just ate what was served and built up immunity." Ryan quickly changed the subject, squeezing my hand under the table in silent support. Over the following months, several small incidents occurred that raised red flags. At a casual family lunch, Deborah served a Thai salad with crushed peanuts, claiming she completely forgot about my allergy. During Christmas, she questioned whether I was absolutely certain about my diagnosis, suggesting I might have outgrown it or been misdiagnosed. Each time, Ryan defended me, but also tried to smooth things over, attributing his mother's behavior to forgetfulness or old-fashioned thinking rather than deliberate disregard. "Mom grew up in a different generation," he'd explain. "They didn't understand allergies like we do now. She's trying in her way." I wanted to believe him. I wanted a harmonious relationship with my new family. So I smiled through the uncomfortable moments, always bringing safe food options to family gatherings and trying to connect with Deborah through other shared interests. Yet her comments continued. "Some people just want special attention," she once whispered to Ryan's aunt, unaware I could hear from the adjacent room. Or, in my day, we didn't make everyone change their lives because one person had a problem. Despite these tensions, I maintained hope that our relationship would improve with time. When the invitation arrived for the annual Thompson family reunion at Ryan's parents' sprawling suburban home, I saw it as an opportunity to strengthen bonds with the extended family, many of whom were far more accepting than Deborah. The week before the gathering, I meticulously prepared. I baked a delicious chocolate cake using special allergen-free ingredients, taking extra care to make it appealing to everyone, not just safe for me. I chose a beautiful outfit that I thought would meet Deborah's exacting standards. Ryan and I discussed strategies for navigating potential awkward situations, and he promised to stay close throughout the event. "It'll be fine," he assured me as we loaded the car that Saturday morning. "Jessica will be there with her kids, and you know she adores you." His sister had indeed been wonderfully supportive from our first meeting. As we drove to his parents' house, I felt genuinely optimistic. For years into my relationship with Ryan, surely his family would have accepted both me and the reality of my medical condition by now. How terribly wrong I was. The Thompson family reunion was in full swing when Ryan and I arrived at his parents' immaculately landscaped property. Cars lined the circular driveway, and the sounds of conversation and laughter drifted from the backyard. I clutched my carefully prepared allergen-free chocolate cake in its covered container, taking a deep breath as Ryan parked behind his cousin's SUV. "Ready?" he asked, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. "As I'll ever be," I replied, mustering a smile that felt more confident than I actually was. The backyard had been transformed into an elegant entertainment space. White tents sheltered long tables draped in cream-colored linens, floral centerpieces dotted the surfaces, and string lights hung overhead for when evening would arrive. At least 30 people mingled around the space, some clustered near the bar, others seated at tables engaged in animated conversation. Ryan's cousin Amanda spotted us first, rushing over with genuine warmth. "Sophia, Ryan, you made it." She embraced me carefully, mindful of the cake container I was holding. "Is this one of your famous desserts? Everyone's still talking about that incredible berry tart you brought to Easter." Her enthusiasm boosted my confidence as more of Ryan's relatives approached to greet us. His cousin Michael and wife Vanessa asked about my recent promotion. His uncle George wanted to hear about our weekend trips to the coast. Ryan's sister Jessica appeared with her 2 children in tow, wrapping me in a tight hug. "So glad you're here," she whispered. "Mom's been in rare form today. Consider yourself warned." As if summoned by her daughter's comment, Deborah Thompson materialized before us, impeccably dressed in a designer pantsuit, her silver blonde hair perfectly styled. She air-kissed Ryan's cheeks before turning her critical gaze to me. "Sophia, dear, that's an interesting choice of dress for a family gathering." Her eyes flickered to the container in my hands. "And I see you've brought your special food again." "You know, I did prepare plenty of options for everyone." "It's just dessert, Mom," Ryan interjected. "Sophia made it to share with everyone." "How thoughtful," she replied, her tone suggesting the opposite. "Well, you can put it with the other desserts, though I doubt anyone will have room after my triple-layer chocolate mousse cake. It's been a family favorite for 20 years. Before I could respond, Thomas approached, martini in hand. He nodded curtly at us, barely making eye contact. "Ryan, Sophia, grab yourselves drinks. Dinner's being served in 30 minutes. He guided Deborah away, but not before I noticed her whispering something in his ear that made him glance back at me with an unreadable expression. "Don't let them get to you," Ryan murmured as we made our way to the bar. "Let's just enjoy seeing everyone else." The cocktail hour continued pleasantly enough as we circulated among the extended family. I placed my cake with the other desserts on a side table, making mental note of its location so I could find it later. When the dinner bell rang, we took our assigned seats at the main table, unfortunately directly across from Ryan's parents. The meal began with Deborah recounting elaborate stories of preparing the feast, emphasizing special ingredients and family recipes passed down through generations. Throughout the first course, I noticed her frequently leaning over to whisper to Thomas, both of them occasionally glancing in my direction. "Is everything all right with your salad, Sophia?" Deborah asked loudly when she caught me carefully examining the ingredients. "It's just a simple garden salad. Surely that meets your requirements." "It looks delicious, thank you," I responded politely, having confirmed it appeared safe. As the main course arrived, the tension slightly dissipated as conversations broke into smaller groups. Ryan's brother-in-law engaged me in a discussion about marketing strategies for his startup, providing welcome distraction from Deborah's scrutiny. Still, I couldn't help noticing her disapproving glances whenever I passed on certain dishes or asked about ingredients. In my day, she announced to the table during a momentary lull, people weren't so particular about food. We ate what was served and were grateful for it. Now everyone has some special diet or alleged sensitivity. She emphasized the word alleged while staring directly at me. Ryan's sister Jessica immediately changed the subject, asking her brother about our upcoming vacation plans, but the damage was done. I felt the familiar sting of being disbelieved and dismissed, a sensation all too common for those with invisible medical conditions. When dinner concluded, family members began bringing out the array of desserts. Jessica's children ran excitedly toward the display, pointing at the various options. I stood to retrieve my chocolate cake, hoping at least some people might try it. As I approached the dessert table, several relatives gathered around, examining the offerings. Ryan's cousin Michael's wife Vanessa noticed me approaching. "Is one of these yours, Sophia?" she asked kindly. "Yes, the chocolate cake with the berries on top. It's completely peanut-free, so safe for me, but everyone's welcome to enjoy it." A few people expressed interest, including Jessica and her children. Just as Vanessa was about to serve herself a slice, Deborah appeared with her own elaborate creation. "Here's the real showstopper," she announced, placing her mousse cake centrally on the table. A family tradition that everyone looks forward to all year. Those other desserts are lovely attempts, but nothing compares to Grandmother Thompson's recipe. She turned to me with a thin smile. "Sophia, dear, it must be so difficult having to make your own special food with all those substitutions. It can never quite taste like the real thing, can it? Such a shame you have to miss out on authentic flavors because of your fancy allergy." The dismissive way she said fancy allergy in front of everyone sent a wave of embarrassment through me. Several relatives looked uncomfortable, while others seemed to agree with Deborah's assessment. I felt my cheeks burning as I excused myself, mumbling something about needing the restroom. Once alone, I splashed cold water on my face and took several deep breaths. I could hear Ryan's voice through the door, clearly engaged in a heated but hushed argument with his mother. I wasn't going to let her ruin the entire evening. I straightened my dress, reapplied my lipstick, and prepared to return to the party with dignity intact. When I returned from the bathroom, composed and determined to salvage the evening, I immediately noticed something wrong at the dessert table. The space where my chocolate cake had been was conspicuously empty. Thinking someone might have moved it to make room for Deborah's mousse creation, I scanned the surrounding tables, but saw no sign of my dessert. "Looking for something?" Jessica approached, holding a plate with a slice of fruit tart. "My cake seems to have disappeared," I explained, continuing to search the crowded table. "That's strange. It was here just a few minutes ago. Maybe they moved it to the kitchen to make more room," she offered, though her expression suggested she wasn't convinced. We both headed toward the house, checking side tables along the way. As we approached the sliding glass doors to the kitchen, movement near the side of the property caught my eye. Through the window, I glimpsed Thomas, my father-in-law, hurriedly carrying what looked like my cake container toward the large trash bins behind the garage. "Is that?" Jessica began, following my gaze. "Your father with my cake," I finished, a mixture of confusion and disbelief washing over me. Without waiting for her response, I quickly made my way through the house and out the side door, Jessica following close behind. By the time we reached the trash area, Thomas was already walking back toward the house, empty-handed. His expression changed from startled to defensive when he saw us. "Thomas, did you just throw away my cake?" I asked directly, struggling to keep my voice steady. He straightened his posture, adjusting his designer watch. "I was simply clearing some items that were no longer needed." My cake wasn't no longer needed. I specifically brought it so I would have a safe dessert option, and others were interested in trying it too. I fought to control the tremor in my voice. "Why would you throw away food that wasn't yours to dispose of?" Thomas glanced toward the house, as if checking whether anyone else was witnessing our conversation. It was cluttering the dessert table. Deborah's arrangements are always perfect, and your additional item was disrupting the presentation. "Dad, that's ridiculous," Jessica interjected. "Sophia's cake wasn't harming anything." This was deliberately unkind. "I don't need to explain myself," he responded coldly. "This is my home, and I decide what stays and what goes." By this time, Ryan had noticed our absence and came looking for us. Seeing the three of us in what was clearly a tense confrontation, he rushed over. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between us with concern. "Your father threw my cake in the trash," I explained, my voice finally breaking. He won't explain why, except that it was cluttering the dessert table. Ryan's expression transformed from confusion to anger. "Dad, is this true? You threw away Sophia's food?" "The cake she specifically made to be safe for her allergy." Thomas's jaw tightened. "Don't make this into something it's not, Ryan. It was just a cake." "It wasn't just a cake," Ryan countered, his voice rising. "It was the only dessert option Sophia could safely eat tonight. You know about her allergy." This was deliberately exclusionary and disrespectful. Their argument escalated, drawing attention from nearby guests. Several family members drifted closer, trying to discern what was happening. Among them was Deborah, who approached with an expression of practiced concern that didn't reach her eyes. "What's all this commotion?" she asked, placing a restraining hand on Thomas's arm. "Mom, Dad threw away Sophia's allergen-free cake," Ryan explained, still visibly upset. "The one she brought specifically because of her peanut allergy." Deborah's response chilled me to the bone. Instead of surprise or appropriate concern, a strange, satisfied smile briefly flickered across her face before she composed herself. "Oh dear, what a misunderstanding," she said, her voice saccharine. "But really, Sophia, sometimes we need to face our fears. Don't you think all this caution might be a bit excessive?" Her words hung in the air, loaded with implication. The gathering family members shifted uncomfortably, some looking embarrassed by the situation, others seemingly agreeing with Deborah's dismissive attitude. The division was painfully clear: those who understood the legitimacy of medical concerns and those who viewed them as exaggerations or bids for attention. Ryan's cousin Amanda stepped forward, breaking the awkward silence. "I have some fruit salad inside that should be safe, Sophia. Would you like some?" Her kindness nearly brought tears to my eyes, but the damage was done. I felt humiliated, invalidated, and increasingly isolated. What should have been a pleasant family gathering had devolved into a painful reminder that some people would never accept or respect my medical needs. "I think we should leave," Ryan said quietly to me, his arm protectively around my shoulders. "Don't be ridiculous," Deborah objected. "You can't leave now. We haven't even done the family photos or the anniversary toast for your aunt and uncle." "I'm sorry, but this has gone too far," Ryan replied firmly. When someone deliberately throws away food that was brought specifically because of a serious medical condition, it crosses a line. As we gathered our belongings and said hasty goodbyes to those family members who seemed genuinely sorry to see us leave, Jessica pulled me aside. "Something feels really off about this," she whispered. "Mom was acting weird about the desserts earlier. Stay in touch, okay? And let me know you're all right later." The drive home began in tense silence, both of us processing the evening's events. About 15 minutes into the journey, I noticed an uncomfortable sensation beginning in my throat. A familiar tingling started around my lips, followed by an intensifying itch across my skin. "Ryan," I said, my voice already changing as my throat began to tighten. "Something's wrong. I think I'm having a reaction." His eyes widened with alarm as he glanced at me, immediately noting the hives beginning to appear on my neck and arms. "Your EpiPen? Where's your EpiPen?" "Purse," I managed, already struggling to breathe normally. "But we need hospital." Ryan immediately changed course, heading toward the nearest emergency room, his knuckles white on the steering wheel as he placed a frantic call to 911 on speakerphone. As the dispatcher assured us an emergency team would be ready upon arrival, a terrifying thought crossed my increasingly foggy mind. What had I unknowingly consumed at the Thompson family gathering? The next few hours unfolded in a blur of emergency lights, medical terminology, and the persistent sound of monitoring equipment. By the time Ryan screeched to a halt at the emergency entrance, my breathing had become alarmingly labored. Hives covered most of my visible skin, and the familiar, terrifying sensation of my airways constricting intensified with each passing moment. Medical staff rushed out with a wheelchair as Ryan explained my situation in panicked fragments. "Severe peanut allergy. Symptoms started 20 minutes ago. She has an EpiPen but needs emergency care." Inside, the team worked with practiced efficiency. A nurse administered epinephrine while another started an 4-line. The attending physician, Dr. Patel, fired rapid questions at Ryan about what I might have eaten while monitoring my vital signs, which were becoming increasingly unstable. Blood pressures dropping, one nurse called out. "Pulse ox 84% and falling. Start her on oxygen and prepare for possible intubation," Dr. Patel ordered. "Sir, we need to know exactly what your wife might have consumed containing peanuts." Ryan ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "I don't know. We were at my parents' house for a family gathering." Sophia was extremely careful, as always. She only ate foods she confirmed were safe. The medication began taking effect, temporarily easing my breathing, but Dr. Patel's expression remained grave. "This is a severe anaphylactic reaction. We need to administer steroids and antihistamines and continue monitoring. She'll need to stay overnight at minimum." As the immediate crisis response transitioned to ongoing treatment, I drifted in and out of awareness, catching fragments of conversation and feeling the uncomfortable but necessary medical interventions. Ryan remained constantly at my side, alternating between reassuring me and making frantic phone calls. "Jessica, I need to know exactly what was served tonight," I heard him say during one such call. "Sophia's in the ER with a severe allergic reaction." "Yes, definitely peanuts based on what the doctor is saying." "No, that's impossible." She was so careful. Hours passed in the sterile hospital environment. The medication stabilized my condition enough that intubation wasn't necessary, but Dr. Patel explained I wasn't out of danger yet. "Anaphylaxis can have a biphasic response," she warned Ryan. "Sometimes symptoms return after the initial treatment. We need to monitor her closely." Through my medication-induced haze, I registered Ryan's sister Jessica arriving at the hospital, her face etched with worry and something else, determination. She pulled Ryan into the hallway for a private conversation, but their voices carried into my room. "Ryan, I found something you need to see," Jessica said urgently. "After you left, I was helping clean up, and I noticed Mom acting strangely around the dessert area. She was gathering plates really quickly, almost like she was hiding something." "What are you saying, Jess?" Ryan's voice sounded strained, exhausted. "I found this in the kitchen trash," Jessica continued. "It's a small container of crushed peanuts. And Ryan, it was hidden inside an empty container of the same chocolate Sophia's cake was made with." That doesn't necessarily mean anything," Ryan responded, though his voice lacked conviction. "There's more," Jessica said quietly. "Mom texted me afterward, but I think she meant to text Dad." Look, I couldn't see what she was showing him, but Ryan's sharp intake of breath was audible even from my bed. Crisis averted, she just needed to leave early, no real harm done. Now maybe she'll stop exaggerating about this allergy business and Ryan will see I was right all along. Ryan read aloud, his voice trembling with shock and mounting anger. Mom wrote this? She deliberately. The implications hung in the air, too terrible to fully articulate. My mother-in-law had intentionally contaminated my food with the one substance that could kill me, all to prove some twisted point about the legitimacy of my medical condition. Jessica entered my room, tears in her eyes as she approached my bedside. Sophia, I'm so sorry. I found evidence. I think my mother put crushed peanuts in your cake before Dad threw it away. Ryan followed, his face ashen. The text Jessica received. Mom all but admitted she tested your allergy. She actually thinks she did nothing wrong. Dr. Patel, who had returned to check my vitals, overheard the conversation. Are you saying someone deliberately exposed the patient to a known allergen? Her professional demeanor cracked slightly, revealing genuine alarm. That's not just dangerous, it could be considered assault. We've already found traces of peanut protein in her system. Could she have died? Ryan asked, his voice barely audible. The doctor's expression was grave. Absolutely. Anaphylaxis can be fatal within minutes without proper treatment. If you hadn't recognized the symptoms so quickly and gotten her here, yes, this could have had a much worse outcome. The weight of this realization descended on the room. Someone I should have been able to trust, my husband's mother, had deliberately poisoned me to prove a point. The betrayal was so profound, so incomprehensible, that my mind struggled to process it even through the fog of medication. Ryan sank into the chair beside my bed, taking my hand carefully around the foreline. I can't believe this, he whispered, more to himself than to me. My own mother, she could have killed you. As the night progressed, my medical condition stabilized, but the emotional aftermath was just beginning. Ryan alternated between sitting silently, stunned by his mother's actions, and pacing the room in barely contained fury. Jessica remained with us, fielding calls from concerned family members who had heard pieces of what happened. Aunt Laura and Uncle Steve are horrified, she reported after one such call. So are most of the cousins. But she hesitated, glancing at Ryan. But what? He prompted. Grandma Thompson and a few others are defending Mom, saying she was just trying to help and that no real harm was done. Jessica's disgust was evident. As if putting someone in the hospital is helping. The family was fracturing along lines of those who understood the severity of what Deborah had done and those who minimized or excused it. But as I lay in that hospital bed, connected to monitors and medication, one thing became crystal clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. 3 days after my emergency hospitalization, I was finally discharged with a prescription for prednisone, a new set of EpiPens, and instructions for follow-up care. The physical symptoms of the anaphylactic reaction had largely subsided, leaving behind exhaustion and a persistent soreness in my throat. The emotional wounds, however, were still raw and gaping. Ryan had barely left my side throughout the ordeal, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair and coordinating with my workplace about my sudden absence. The anger that had initially consumed him had crystallized into a cold, resolute determination that I'd never seen before. We need to confront them, he said as he drove us home from the hospital. Both of them. What my mother did was deliberate, and Dad had to have known when he threw away your cake. Are you sure that's what you want? I asked quietly. They're your parents, Ryan. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. They stopped acting like parents the moment they put your life at risk. This isn't a minor disagreement or a personality clash, Sophia. My mother could have killed you. Back home, the reality of what had happened continued to sink in. Our phones buzzed constantly with messages from Ryan's extended family, some expressing genuine concern and outrage, others questioning whether we were overreacting. Ryan's cousin Amanda had sent a beautiful flower arrangement with a heartfelt note of support, while his Uncle George, left a voicemail suggesting we keep this unfortunate misunderstanding within the family. Jessica visited daily, bringing updates about the family fallout. "It's like a civil war," she reported. "Mom's telling anyone who'll listen that she was just trying to help and that your reaction wasn't that serious. She's painting herself as this concerned mother-in-law who's being villainized. And people are believing her?" I asked incredulously. "Some are," Jessica admitted. "Mostly the older generation who don't understand allergies. But others are absolutely furious with her, especially after I showed a few people her text message." 5 days after my discharge, Ryan decided it was time for the confrontation. He called his parents and requested a meeting at their home, his tone leaving no room for refusal. Jessica offered to accompany us for support, but Ryan felt this needed to be handled between the four of us. The drive to the Thompson residence was tense. I'd taken an extra dose of anxiety medication prescribed by my doctor, but my heart still raced at the thought of facing the woman who had deliberately poisoned me. Ryan reached across the console to squeeze my hand. "We do this together," he said firmly. "And then we decide what our relationship with them looks like going forward, if there's any relationship at all." Deborah and Thomas were waiting in their immaculate living room when we arrived. The formal space felt cold and unwelcoming, much like their expressions. Deborah sat primly on the edge of the sofa, while Thomas stood near the fireplace, arms crossed defensively. "Ryan, Sophia," Deborah greeted with artificial warmth. "I'm glad to see you're feeling better. This whole situation has been blown completely out of proportion." Ryan remained standing, declining their offer to sit. "Is that really how you see this, Mom?" "Sophia nearly died. She spent 3 days in the hospital fighting for her life because of what you did." "What I did?" Deborah's voice rose an octave in practiced indignation. "I simply prepared food for a family gathering, as I've done for 30 years. "Stop it." Ryan's voice was dangerously quiet. "We know you put crushed peanuts in Sophia's cake. We have your text to Jessica admitting it." Color drained from Deborah's face, but she quickly recovered. "That text is being completely misinterpreted. I would never deliberately harm anyone." "Then explain what you meant by crisis averted and Sophia exaggerating about this allergy business," Ryan demanded, pulling up the screenshot on his phone. Thomas finally spoke, his businessman's composure cracking slightly. "Deborah, what have you done?" "Nothing," she insisted, but her perfect facade was beginning to crumble. "I merely thought that if Sophia tried a tiny amount, she'd see her reaction wasn't nearly as severe as she claims. Many people outgrow allergies, or they're psychosomatic to begin with." "So you admit it," I said, finding my voice at last. "You deliberately put an ingredient in my food that you knew could kill me." "Kill you?" "Don't be so dramatic," Deborah scoffed, though uncertainty flashed across her face. "A little exposure therapy never hurt anyone." Exposure therapy is a medical procedure conducted by allergists in controlled environments with emergency equipment standing by, I explained, struggling to keep my voice steady. "What you did was attempted assault, possibly attempted murder." Thomas paled visibly. "Deborah, please tell me you didn't do this." Confronted from all sides, Deborah's carefully constructed justifications began to collapse. "Fine. Yes, I put a small amount of crushed peanuts in the cake batter. But only because I was tired of watching everyone walk on eggshells around Sophia. Tired of special accommodations and menu changes and constant attention-seeking behavior disguised as a medical condition." Her admission hung in the air, shocking in its callousness. Ryan's face hardened into an expression I'd never seen before. "And you, Dad," he turned to Thomas. "You threw away the cake. Did you know what Mom had done?" Thomas hesitated, guilt written across his features. I suspected something was wrong. Deborah had been acting strangely around the desserts. When I saw her adding something to Sophia's cake, I confronted her privately. She admitted what she'd done, and I disposed of the cake immediately. "But you didn't warn Sophia." Ryan's voice was laden with disgust. "You didn't tell her that Mom had contaminated food she might have already eaten." You protected Mom instead of protecting an innocent person from harm. I didn't think she'd actually eaten any yet, Thomas defended weakly. And I didn't want to cause a scene at the party. Heaven forbid we cause a scene, I said bitterly. Much better to let me go into anaphylactic shock in the car on the way home. Deborah attempted to regain control of the narrative. This is being blown completely out of proportion. You're fine now, aren't you? And maybe next time you'll be less dramatic about every little food ingredient. Something inside me snapped. After years of politely educating people about my condition, of quietly bringing my own food to gatherings, of thanking people profusely when they made even minimal accommodations, I was done. I nearly died, Deborah, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. The emergency room doctor told us explicitly that without immediate treatment, I could have died. All because you decided your opinion about my medical condition mattered more than actual medical science. More than my life. I stood up, looking directly at the woman who had so casually endangered me. You don't get to decide which medical conditions are real. You don't get to test someone's allergy like some twisted experiment. What you did wasn't just misguided, it was cruel, dangerous, and possibly criminal. Ryan placed his hand on my shoulder, his support unwavering. We need to know right now if you understand the seriousness of what you've done, Mom. If you're genuinely sorry and ready to acknowledge how wrong this was. Instead of contrition, Deborah's expression hardened. I was trying to help this family. To stop this charade that's been dividing us. And now you're threatening me? Talking about criminal charges? After everything I've done for this family. Ryan shook his head in disbelief. That's your response? To make yourself the victim? Mom, you poisoned my wife. You put her life at risk to prove a point. It was a mother's concern, not poison, Deborah insisted, tears finally appearing, though whether from genuine emotion or tactical manipulation was impossible to discern. I've lost my son over a misunderstanding. This isn't a misunderstanding, Ryan replied firmly. This is a choice you made, and now you're facing the consequences. Until you can truly acknowledge what you did and show genuine remorse, we can't have a relationship with you. Either of you, he added, glancing at his father. Thomas, who had remained largely silent, finally spoke. Son, please. Your mother made a mistake, but cutting us off completely. A mistake is forgetting an appointment or saying something insensitive, Ryan interrupted. What Mom did was deliberate and dangerous. And you, Dad, you chose to protect her reputation over Sophia's safety. Those aren't mistakes, they're choices that reveal character. As we prepared to leave, Deborah made one final attempt to maintain control. If you do this, if you pursue this ridiculous vendetta, you'll destroy this family. Is that what you want? I turned back to face her one last time. Deborah, you nearly destroyed me. The fact that you still can't see that tells us everything we need to know. We left the Thompson house with the weight of finality hanging over us. In the car, Ryan released a shuddering breath, reaching for my hand across the console. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I never imagined they could do something like this. It's not your fault, I assured him, though my own emotions were a storm of hurt, anger, and lingering disbelief. But what happens now? Now, Ryan said with quiet determination, we protect ourselves, and we make sure they understand the seriousness of what they've done. No more excuses, no more sweeping things under the rug. As we drove home in the fading afternoon light, I realized we were entering uncharted territory, a painful journey of establishing boundaries, seeking justice, and ultimately finding a way to heal from a betrayal so profound it had altered the very foundation of our family relationships. The week following our confrontation with Ryan's parents unfolded like a surreal nightmare. After careful consideration and consultation with my doctor, who documented the severity of my anaphylactic reaction, we decided to meet with an attorney specializing in personal injury cases. Lauren Michaels, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, listened intently as we recounted the events, her expression growing increasingly grave. What your mother-in-law did constitutes assault, she explained, organizing her notes methodically. She deliberately introduced a substance she knew could harm you. The fact that your father-in-law knew and failed to warn you could potentially make him an accessory. We don't necessarily want to press criminal charges, Ryan explained, his voice strained. But we need them to understand the seriousness of what happened. And, honestly, we need protection. Lauren nodded understanding. Let's start with a formal cease and desist letter outlining the potential legal consequences. Sometimes that's enough to drive home the reality of the situation. We can also file a police report to create an official record, which gives you options if their behavior escalates. As we navigated the unfamiliar terrain of legal proceedings, the Thompson family fracture deepened into a chasm. Ryan's phone buzzed constantly with messages from relatives taking sides. His Aunt Patricia called, tearfully begging him to forgive your mother's misguided attempt to help. His cousin Michael texted support, writing, "What happened to Sophia was inexcusable. We're here for you both." Jessica became our most steadfast ally, keeping us informed of the narrative Deborah was spinning throughout the family network. She's telling everyone it was just a tiny amount of peanut, and that your hospitalization was an overreaction, Jessica reported during one of her frequent visits. She's painting herself as this concerned mother who's being persecuted for trying to help her son escape a controlling relationship. Controlling. I echoed in disbelief. Because I don't want to be poisoned at family gatherings? I know, Jessica sighed. It's ridiculous. But some people are buying it, especially the ones who've never understood food allergies to begin with. The situation escalated when Deborah began posting vague, martyred updates on social media, heartbroken when good intentions are twisted into something sinister. Family should forgive. Her carefully crafted posts garnered sympathy from distant relatives and friends unfamiliar with the full story, creating an alternative narrative where she was the victim of overreaction and ingratitude. Then came the veiled threats. First, a message from Thomas to Ryan, "Your mother is absolutely devastated. If you continue this vindictive path, remember that actions have consequences for everyone involved." Later, a family friend called to unofficially let us know that Deborah was considering her own legal action for defamation and emotional distress. They're trying to intimidate us, Ryan realized, his initial shock hardening into resolve. They still don't get it. This isn't about family drama or hurt feelings. This is about someone deliberately endangering your life. The stress began taking a physical toll. I developed insomnia, startling awake with panic attacks and vivid nightmares about being unable to breathe. Everyday activities became fraught with new anxiety. Eating at restaurants, attending work functions, even grocery shopping triggered hypervigilance about potential allergen exposure. The psychological trauma of being intentionally poisoned by someone I should have been able to trust ran deeper than I could have imagined. Ryan noticed my deterioration and gently suggested therapy. "This isn't something we should face alone," he said one evening, finding me crying silently in our bathroom after another nightmare. "What Mom did was traumatic. There's no shame in getting help." Dr. Eleanor Chin, a trauma specialist, helped me understand my psychological responses were normal reactions to an abnormal situation. When someone deliberately harms you, especially someone who should protect you, it violates your basic sense of safety in the world, she explained during our sessions. We need to rebuild that foundation. Through therapy, I began developing coping mechanisms for the anxiety and working through the complex emotions of betrayal. Ryan attended several sessions with me, strengthening our united front against the continuing family pressure. Meanwhile, our support network grew in unexpected ways. Ryan's sister Jessica and her husband became regular fixtures at our home, bringing meals and offering companionship. My parents flew in from Colorado, providing both emotional support and practical assistance as I recovered. Ryan's cousins Amanda and Michael publicly declared their support, challenging Deborah's version of events within family circles. Even professionally, I found solidarity. When I returned to work, my team surprised me with an allergen-free welcome back lunch and reassurances that they'd made the office kitchen a safer space. My boss, herself the parent of a child with severe allergies, became an unexpected advocate, allowing me flexible hours for therapy appointments and legal consultations. 2 months after the incident, our attorney filed the police report we'd been considering. The decision came after Deborah escalated her campaign, sending a group email to extended family members that minimized my reaction and implied I was manipulating Ryan against his family. The formal documentation of the assault provided a sobering counterpoint to her narrative. Detective Wilson, a methodical woman with 20 years of experience, interviewed us separately and together, taking detailed notes about the incident. "We take cases like this seriously," she assured us. Deliberately exposing someone to a known allergen is not a prank or a misunderstanding. It's assault. The investigation proceeded with statements from Jessica, who provided the damning text messages, and Dr. Patel, who confirmed the severity of my reaction and the presence of peanut protein in my system. The hospital records substantiated the life-threatening nature of the anaphylaxis. When Deborah received official notification of the investigation, her response shifted from defensive to panicked. Thomas called Ryan repeatedly, his voice losing its usual authoritative tone. "Your mother could face criminal charges," he said during one call. "Is that really what you want? To see your own mother prosecuted?" "What I wanted," Ryan replied steadily, "was for Mom to acknowledge what she did and sincerely apologize. What I wanted was for her to understand the seriousness of allergies so she'd never endanger anyone else this way. She's had multiple opportunities to take responsibility, and instead, she's attacked Sophia's character and tried to turn the family against us." The legal proceedings moved forward inexorably. Detective Wilson called to inform us that the district attorney had reviewed the evidence and found sufficient grounds to charge Deborah with assault. The gravity of potential legal consequences finally seemed to penetrate the bubble of justification she'd constructed around herself. Thomas called again, his approach now dramatically different. "Please," he begged, "tell us what we can do to make this right. Your mother is terrified." "She should be," Ryan responded, years of suppressed frustration evident in his voice. "She could have killed Sophia. Do you understand that yet? This isn't about family politics or preferences or traditions. This is about someone I love nearly dying because Mom decided her opinions mattered more than medical science." 6 months after the incident that had irrevocably altered our family dynamic, Deborah Thompson sat across from her attorney in the district attorney's office, finally confronting the legal reality of her actions. The composed, controlling woman who had orchestrated family gatherings with military precision for decades now faced the prospect of a criminal record and public humiliation. The evidence against her was substantial: the text message admission, multiple witness statements, medical documentation of my near-fatal reaction, and her own inconsistent explanations. Faced with this reality, she accepted a plea deal that included probation, community service hours specifically with allergy awareness organizations, and mandatory attendance at an educational program about severe allergies. As news of the legal resolution spread through the family, the unified front of denial that had protected Deborah began to crumble. Relatives who had initially defended her actions or minimized my experience now called or texted with awkward apologies and expressions of shock at the full story. The family narrative was shifting, and with it, the power dynamic that had allowed Deborah's behavior to go unchallenged for so long. Through it all, Ryan remained my steadfast partner, never wavering in his support despite the enormous personal cost of standing against his parents. "You're my family," he reminded me during a particularly difficult evening after a grueling deposition. The family we choose is sometimes more important than the family we're born into. As summer transitioned to fall, we began the delicate process of defining what our relationship with the Thompsons might look like moving forward, if any relationship was possible at all. The legal battle had created boundaries that Deborah could no longer ignore or dismiss, but the emotional wounds remained raw and deep. 1 year after the incident that nearly took my life, Ryan and I sat on our back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. So much had changed in those 12 months, not just circumstances, but fundamental shifts in how we viewed family, safety, trust, and our own resilience. "I got a call from Dad today," Ryan said, his fingers lightly tracing patterns on my hand. "He wants to meet." Just him, not Mom. Thomas Thompson had gradually separated himself from Deborah's narrative over the past 6 months. After her legal case concluded with the plea deal, he had reached out tentatively, first through Jessica, then with brief, formal emails expressing regret without quite reaching the threshold of a genuine apology. "Do you want to see him?" I asked, studying my husband's face for signs of the internal struggle I knew continued beneath his composed exterior. "I think I do," Ryan admitted after a thoughtful pause. "Not for reconciliation necessarily, but for closure, maybe. And he said he has something important to tell us both." 3 days later, we met Thomas at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between our home and the house where Ryan had grown up. He looked older than I remembered, the confident businessman persona diminished by the events of the past year. He rose when we entered, his handshake tentative, his eyes unable to fully meet mine. "Thank you for coming," he began after we'd ordered coffee. "I've been trying to find the right words for months now." "Words for what, Dad?" Ryan asked, his tone neither hostile nor warm. Thomas took a deep breath. "For an apology. A real one, not the qualified statements I've been hiding behind." He turned to face me directly. "Sophia, what happened at our home that day was inexcusable. Deborah was wrong to put peanuts in your food, and I was wrong, criminally wrong, to throw away the evidence without warning you of the danger." The forthright admission surprised me after months of deflection and minimization. "What changed?" I asked. "Many things," Thomas replied, turning the coffee cup slowly in his hands. "The legal consequences, yes, but more than that, watching my family fragment. Seeing the genuine horror on Jessica's face when she described what happened. And honestly, the education course the court mandated. I had no idea how severe food allergies could be. No real concept of what anaphylaxis does to the body." He paused, visibly gathering courage before continuing. "But mostly, it was confronting my own cowardice. I've spent 40 years enabling Deborah's controlling behavior because it was easier than standing up to her. I threw away that cake knowing it could harm you, and I said nothing because I feared her reaction more than I valued your safety. That realization has kept me awake night after night." His words hung in the air between us, raw with a vulnerability I'd never witnessed in this traditionally stoic man. "Where's Mom in all this?" Ryan asked, the question that inevitably shadowed any potential reconciliation. Thomas sighed heavily. "Deborah is struggling to accept reality. The legal consequences shook her, but she still views herself as misunderstood rather than wrong. She's attending the mandated counseling, but I don't know if she'll ever truly acknowledge the harm she caused." He straightened in his chair. "But my apology isn't contingent on hers. My actions were my responsibility, regardless of her influence." This separation, this individual accountability, represented a seismic shift in the Thompson family dynamic. For the first time, Thomas was defining himself outside the unit he and Deborah had presented to the world for decades. "I appreciate your honesty," I said carefully. "Genuinely. But trust isn't rebuilt in a single conversation." "I don't expect it to be," Thomas replied. "I'm not asking for forgiveness or for things to return to how they were. I just wanted you both to know that I understand now, and I'm truly, deeply sorry." As we parted ways, the interaction left me with complicated emotions, neither the cathartic reconciliation of movies, nor the righteous finality of complete estrangement. Instead, it offered something messier but perhaps more authentic, the beginning of a long, uncertain process of establishing new boundaries and expectations. While the relationship with Ryan's parents evolved in fits and starts, other aspects of life developed in unexpected directions. The support group I had started as personal therapy, a monthly meeting for adults with severe allergies facing skepticism or dismissal, had grown into a vibrant community. What began with 5 people sharing stories in a community center room now included 30 regular attendees, an active online forum, and educational outreach to local restaurants and schools. "You've turned something traumatic into something that helps others," Ryan observed after one particularly successful awareness event at the hospital where I'd been treated. "That's incredible. It helps me as much as anyone else," I admitted. "Every time someone shares their experience of not being believed, I feel less alone. Less like it was something about me specifically that made Deborah act the way she did." Indeed, hearing others' stories of family members who tested allergies, partners who hid ingredients, or coworkers who deliberately contaminated lunch areas had reinforced what my therapist had been telling me all along. The problem had never been me or my medical condition. The problem was a persistent cultural skepticism about invisible disabilities and medical needs that didn't fit neatly into others' understanding or convenience. Our personal relationships had transformed as well. Ryan's sister Jessica had become not just an ally, but a dear friend, our weekly coffee dates a highlight I looked forward to. Several of Ryan's cousins who had witnessed the aftermath of Deborah's actions had become more educated about food allergies, implementing changes in their own family gatherings to make them safer and more inclusive. Most significantly, Ryan and I had emerged from the crucible of family trauma with a deeper understanding of each other and of our priorities. The unquestioning way he had stood by me, chosen my safety over family harmony, and supported me through the darkest moments had strengthened a bond already built on love and respect. "We're creating our own traditions now," Ryan said as we prepared to host our first major holiday gathering, a deliberate alternative to his mother's tightly controlled family events. Our home was filled with friends, chosen family, and relatives who had demonstrated their support throughout the ordeal. The menu included dishes safe for everyone's dietary needs, with clear labeling and multiple options for those with allergies or restrictions. "It feels different," I observed, watching our guests mingle comfortably. No walking on eggshells, no underlying tension. "This is what family should feel like," Ryan agreed. "Safe, accepting, actually enjoyable." As I reflect on the journey of the past year, the lessons crystallize with surprising clarity. I learned that some people may never fully accept or understand your medical needs, and that's a painful reality to face, especially when those people are family. I learned that standing firm in your right to physical safety isn't making a fuss or being difficult, despite what a lifetime of social conditioning might suggest. Most importantly, I learned that surrounding yourself with people who believe you, who respect your boundaries, and who prioritize your well-being isn't selfish, it's essential. Sometimes the family you choose provides the unconditional support that should have come from the family you were born or married into. My relationship with Deborah will likely never heal completely. The trust destroyed by such a fundamental betrayal isn't easily rebuilt, if at all. But the boundaries established through that painful process have created space for healthier relationships to flourish. Ryan and I have found strength we didn't know we possessed, advocates we didn't realize we had, and ultimately, a more authentic way of living that honors both our needs and our values. The road hasn't been easy, and there are still difficult days. But standing in our kitchen watching Ryan laugh with Jessica as they prepare dessert, or receiving a message from someone in my support group about successfully navigating a challenging family situation, I'm reminded that sometimes the most painful experiences can lead to unexpected growth and connection. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when others dismissed your medical needs? Or had to create boundaries with family members who wouldn't respect your health and safety? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve to have their medical needs taken seriously. Remember, protecting your health isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength in navigating your own path to being believed and respected.
I never thought that emptying my savings account would empty my heart too. My name is Sarah Wilson, a 31-year-old HR manager at a tech firm in Seattle, and I've always believed that family meant unconditional support. Growing up in our modest home just outside Portland, my parents Frank and Diane Wilson weren't perfect, but they gave me enough love and stability to become the first in our family to graduate college. That small ranch-style house with the crooked mailbox and my mother's rose garden was the backdrop to every significant memory I had. So when my phone lit up that Tuesday afternoon with my mother's name, her voice cracking as she explained that the bank was threatening foreclosure, my stomach dropped like I was free-falling from the Space Needle. "Sarah, honey, I didn't want to tell you, but your father, he's been struggling with the mortgage payments for months now. We're 3 months behind and they're going to take the house." I stood frozen in my office, watching Seattle's endless rain streak down the windows while my mother's sobs echoed through the phone. The timing couldn't have been worse. After years of careful saving, I'd finally accumulated enough for a down payment on a small place of my own, just over $20,000 that represented 5 years of overtime, skipped vacations, and meal prepping instead of dining out. But how could I focus on my dreams while the foundation of my childhood memories was about to be sold at auction? My father hadn't even gotten on the phone himself. His pride had always been as sturdy as the oak tree in our backyard. "Mom, how much do you need exactly?" I asked, already mentally saying goodbye to the cozy craftsman home I'd been eyeing in North Seattle. When she hesitantly mentioned the amount, $1,800 plus late fees, I felt a physical ache in my chest. My entire savings account, the tangible proof of my independence and hard work, was about to vanish. Yet something in my gut whispered, a warning that I quickly silenced. Family comes first, right? That's what my parents had always taught me. I couldn't have known that day that my generosity would lead to the most painful lesson of my life, that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most are the ones who will take everything you have and still tell you it's not enough. Have you ever dealt with difficult in-laws or felt underestimated in your career? What would you have done in Sarah's situation? Tried to win Eleanor over differently, walked away, or taken a similar approach? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Remember, sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving others wrong, but discovering your own strength in the process. Thank you for listening to my story today. If it resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing with anyone who might need a reminder of their own worth. Until next time, remember that you are always good enough, regardless of who fails to see it. Looking back now, I should have seen the warning signs scattered throughout my childhood like breadcrumbs leading to an inevitable conclusion. My father, Frank, had always been a proud man with dreams bigger than his wallet could support. I remember warm summer evenings on our porch swing, his arm around me as he'd point to the stars and tell me about the restaurant he'd open someday or the invention he was working on in the garage. Those dreams never materialized, but his pride remained, ironclad, especially when it came to finances. Growing up, I learned quickly not to mention the hushed arguments I overheard at night about overdue bills or the times our electricity flickered out for a day until my mother made a special arrangement with the utility company. My mother, Diane, was the eternal peacekeeper, smoothing over my father's rough edges with gentle excuses and redirections. "Your father works so hard for us," she'd say, applying makeup to cover the dark circles under her eyes. "He just wants the best for this family." When I got accepted to Portland State University with a partial scholarship, the pride in my father's eyes was tempered with something else, a slight resentment that I was breaking away, becoming something different than the path he'd envisioned. Still, I called home religiously every Sunday night during those college years, sending money when I could from my campus jobs, first for my dad's hernia surgery, then for the car repair after my mom's minor accident. Just small things, manageable things that seemed like normal ways to help family. After graduation, despite the guilt trips my father laid about abandoning them, I took a job offer in Seattle, a clean slate where my paycheck reflected my business degree rather than my father's reputation for half-finished projects. For 5 years, I built my career, climbing from administrative assistant to HR coordinator and finally to manager, all while fielding regular calls from home that oscillated between my mother's gentle inquiries about my love life and subtle hints about their financial struggles. The phone call about the foreclosure shouldn't have been surprising, yet somehow it still knocked the wind out of me. When I hung up with my mother, I immediately started researching their situation, calling the mortgage company myself, only to discover the problem was far worse than they'd admitted. They weren't just 3 months behind. They'd been playing catch-up for over a year, making partial payments and racking up penalties. When I offered to drive down that weekend to help sort things out, my mother's voice took on that familiar, nervous quality. "Oh, honey, that's not necessary. Your father's just a little stressed right now. Maybe wait until next month when things settle down." Another red flag I chose to ignore, because acknowledging it would mean confronting the uncomfortable truth that my parents saw me less as a daughter and more as a convenient ATM with an emotional withdrawal method. Have you ever dealt with difficult in-laws or felt underestimated in your career? What would you have done in Sarah's situation? Tried to win Eleanor over differently, walked away, or taken a similar approach? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Remember, sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving others wrong, but discovering your own strength in the process. Thank you for listening to my story today. If it resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing with anyone who might need a reminder of their own worth. Until next time, remember that you are always good enough, regardless of who fails to see it. That night, I couldn't sleep, my mind racing between practical calculations and emotional tug-of-wars. I called my best friend Maya at an unreasonable hour, grateful that our friendship since college dorm days allowed such impositions. $20,000, Maya. Every penny I've saved, I said, staring at my apartment ceiling. Maya didn't mince words. It was what I loved about her. "Sarah, I'm going to say this because I love you. You're enabling them. Again. Remember the emergency car repair that turned into your dad's fishing boat?" Her logic was sound, but logic has little power against the weight of childhood memories. I kept seeing flashes of my life in that house. My height marks penciled on the kitchen doorframe, the backyard treehouse my father built during one of his rare focused periods, the window seat in my bedroom where I'd read Anne of Green Gables so many times the binding fell apart. How could I put a price tag on that? The next morning, I requested a personal day from work and headed to my bank. The physical act of withdrawing my savings was almost ceremonial in its pain. The bank manager's eyebrows shot up when I mentioned the amount, asking if I'd like financial advice on home purchases. "It's not for my home," I said quietly, feeling a strange sense of bereavement as I watched my account balance drop to just enough to cover next month's rent. With the cashier's check folded in my purse, I felt lighter and heavier simultaneously. Before driving to Portland that weekend, I drafted what I thought was a reasonable set of conditions. Financial transparency going forward, a budget we would create together, and monthly check-ins on their spending. I rehearsed how I'd present these conditions like a business proposal, professional and unemotional. When I arrived at the faded blue ranch house, my mother rushed out the door before I'd even turned off the engine, her arms outstretched. My father remained on the porch, his posture stiff as a board. "You didn't need to come all this way," he said, though his eyes darted to my purse. "We would have figured something out." Over dinner at the scratched oak table of my childhood, I carefully laid out my proposal along with the check, trying to frame it as helping them help themselves rather than a bailout. My father's jaw tightened with every word, his knuckles whitening around his fork. "So you think we need a babysitter now? Your mother and I raised you without anyone looking over our shoulders." My mother jumped in, her hand trembling as she placed it over mine. "What your father means is that we're so grateful, sweetie. Of course we'll be more careful now." After an hour of tense negotiation that felt more like emotional hostage situation, my father grudgingly agreed to my conditions, with a half-hearted nod. Yet as I drove away from the bank the following Monday, having deposited the check and settled their immediate debt with the mortgage company, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just thrown a life preserver to someone who might use it as an anchor. The weekend following the bank visit unfolded like a nostalgic movie reel of what our family could have been. My mother prepared all my childhood favorites, her famous pot roast, apple crisp with extra cinnamon, even the special hot chocolate, with homemade whipped cream she used to make when I was sick. My father's granite exterior seemed to soften just slightly around the edges, enough that he actually laughed when I recounted a story about my office's disastrous team-building retreat. "Always the responsible one, weren't you, Sarah Bear?" he said, using my childhood nickname for the first time in years. For a few precious hours, I allowed myself to believe that my sacrifice had purchased not just the house, but also the family dynamics I'd always craved. I extended my stay through Sunday, using the extra day to help my mother organize their financial paperwork at the kitchen table. That's when the fantasy began to crumble. While my mother was outside hanging laundry, they'd never upgraded to a dryer despite my offers to buy one, I discovered a stack of unopened credit card statements tucked inside a fishing magazine in my father's desk drawer. The minimum payments alone totaled more than his monthly pension check. When I gently confronted my mother, her eyes darted to the back door like a cornered animal. "Your father handles the finances, Sarah. I don't ask questions." Before I could process this, my father walked in, his face darkening when he saw the statement spread across the table. "Going through my private things now?" he snapped, snatching the bills and shoving them back in the drawer. "Dad, I just gave you my entire savings. Don't you think I deserve to know the complete picture? There's another $30,000 in credit card debt here that you never mentioned." The argument that followed was ugly. My mother retreated to the bedroom while my father's voice escalated, veins standing out on his neck as he accused me of thinking I was better than us since moving to the city. Only when I mentioned taking back the cashier's check did his tone change, anger morphing into a wounded disappointment that was somehow more manipulative than his rage. "After all we sacrificed for you," he said quietly, "this is how you repay us? By assuming we're trying to cheat you?" That evening, after hours of tense negotiation that left me emotionally drained, we reached a compromise that seemed reasonable at the time. I would be added to their bank account so I could monitor the finances directly, ensuring the mortgage got paid first. My father agreed only because the alternative meant losing the house entirely. On the drive back to Seattle that Sunday night, rain pounding against my windshield, I called Maya and tried to convince her and myself that this new arrangement would work. I can see exactly where the money goes now. They can't hide anything. Maya's silence spoke volumes, but I wasn't ready to hear its message. "Just be careful," she finally said. "People don't change overnight, especially when it comes to money. Habits." I hung up feeling defensive, telling myself that my friend simply couldn't understand the complicated bonds of family obligation. Looking back, I realize I was the one who didn't understand what real family love should look like. The weekend following the bank visit unfolded like a nostalgic movie reel of what our family could have been. My mother prepared all my childhood favorites: her famous pot roast, apple crisp with extra cinnamon, even the special hot chocolate, with homemade whipped cream she used to make when I was sick. My father's granite exterior seemed to soften just slightly around the edges, enough that he actually laughed when I recounted a story about my office's disastrous team-building retreat. "Always the responsible one, weren't you, Sarah Bear?" he said, using my childhood nickname for the first time in years. For a few precious hours, I allowed myself to believe that my sacrifice had purchased not just the house, but also the family dynamics I'd always craved. I extended my stay through Sunday, using the extra day to help my mother organize their financial paperwork at the kitchen table. That's when the fantasy began to crumble. While my mother was outside hanging laundry, they'd never upgraded to a dryer despite my offers to buy one, I discovered a stack of unopened credit card statements tucked inside a fishing magazine in my father's desk drawer. The minimum payments alone totaled more than his monthly pension check. When I gently confronted my mother, her eyes darted to the back door like a cornered animal. "Your father handles the finances, Sarah. I don't ask questions." Before I could process this, my father walked in, his face darkening when he saw the statement spread across the table. "Going through my private things now?" he snapped, snatching the bills and shoving them back in the drawer. "Dad, I just gave you my entire savings. Don't you think I deserve to know the complete picture? There's another $30,000 in credit card debt here that you never mentioned." The argument that followed was ugly. My mother retreated to the bedroom while my father's voice escalated, veins standing out on his neck as he accused me of thinking I was better than us since moving to the city. Only when I mentioned taking back the cashier's check did his tone change, anger morphing into a wounded disappointment that was somehow more manipulative than his rage. After all we sacrificed for you, he said quietly. This is how you repay us? By assuming we're trying to cheat you? That evening, after hours of tense negotiation that left me emotionally drained, we reached a compromise that seemed reasonable at the time. I would be added to their bank account so I could monitor the finances directly, ensuring the mortgage got paid first. My father agreed only because the alternative meant losing the house entirely. On the drive back to Seattle that Sunday night, rain pounding against my windshield, I called Maya and tried to convince her, and myself, that this new arrangement would work. I can see exactly where the money goes now. They can't hide anything. Maya's silence spoke volumes, but I wasn't ready to hear its message. Just be careful, she finally said. People don't change overnight, especially when it comes to money. Habits. I hung up feeling defensive, telling myself that my friend simply couldn't understand the complicated bonds of family obligation. Looking back, I realized I was the one who didn't understand what real family love should look like. The first sign that something was very wrong appeared in the driveway of my childhood home, a gleaming new Ford F-150 truck that definitely hadn't been there during my last visit. My father had always wanted a new truck, complaining about his aging Chevy for years, but we'd specifically discussed postponing any vehicle purchases when creating their budget. I sat in my car for several minutes, trying to control my breathing and giving myself a pep talk about not jumping to conclusions. Maybe it was a friend's truck. Maybe they'd found an incredible deal they couldn't pass up. When I finally knocked on the door, my mother's shock at seeing me was almost comical, her mouth forming a perfect O before she recovered and pulled me into a hug that felt more perfunctory than warm. Sarah, what a surprise! We thought you were working through the holiday. Inside, the house smelled of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie, the dining room table already set with the good china we only used for special occasions. My father emerged from the basement, his momentary deer-in-headlights expression quickly masked by an overly boisterous greeting. There's my successful city girl. Your mother didn't tell me you were coming. The forced normalcy continued through an awkward dinner, joined by my father's brother Uncle Rick and his wife Aunt Linda. I noticed new furniture in the living room, my mother wearing a gold bracelet I hadn't seen before, small upgrades throughout. The house that individually might not raise eyebrows, but collectively painted a disturbing picture of where my $20,000 had actually gone. The breaking point came when I overheard my father and uncle in the kitchen after dinner, their voices lowered, but not enough. So that investment opportunity still open? My uncle asked. My father's reply sent ice through my veins. Put in 15. Grand last week. Guy says we could double it within 6 months. Just don't mention it to Sarah. She thinks the money's only for the mortgage. $15,000. 3/4 of what I'd given them, diverted to some questionable investment scheme while they'd cried poverty and imminent homelessness. I waited until my aunt and uncle left before confronting them, starting with calm questions that quickly escalated as my father's answers became more evasive and ultimately defensive. You went behind my back and put my money into some get-rich-quick scheme after promising it would save your home? My voice shook with a rage I'd never allowed myself to express to my parents. My father's response revealed the ugly truth I'd been avoiding for years. It's my house and my money now. I don't need permission from my daughter to invest in our future. He loomed over me, his face reddened with the same anger I'd witnessed throughout childhood whenever his authority was questioned. Most devastating was my mother's response, not standing up for me, not acknowledging the betrayal, but quietly slipping from the room as she'd always done when conflict arose, leaving me alone to face my father's wrath. That night, I locked myself in my childhood bedroom, the space unchanged since high school with academic medals still hanging on the wall, achievements I'd earned hoping to make them proud. I pulled out old photo albums, studying pictures of us as a seemingly happy family, searching for clues I might have missed. Had I manufactured a version of my parents that never existed? Had their love always been conditional based on what I could provide? Morning came after a sleepless night, and I found the house empty, a hastily scrawled note on the counter. Gone to Black Friday shopping with the Hendersons. Help yourself to leftovers. They couldn't even face me after what had happened. As I stood in the silent kitchen, running my fingers along the height markings on the doorframe that tracked my physical growth, I realized I had yet another kind of growing to do, one that might require painful separation from the people who were supposed to love me most. The drive back to Seattle was a blur of tears and fury, my thoughts oscillating between self-recrimination and raw, unfamiliar anger. How could I have been so blind, so willing to be manipulated? For the first time in my life, I didn't call my mother upon arriving home safely, breaking a lifelong tradition. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my small apartment balcony, watching Seattle's skyline blur through my tears. One day of silence stretched into 3, then a full week. I made several attempts to call, each going straight to voicemail, my text messages showing as delivered but unanswered. The weekend passed in a haze of Netflix and neglected housework, my apartment reflecting the disarray of my emotions. Then on Monday, a text arrived from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi Sarah, this is Carol from next door to your parents. Thought you might want to know they're having some kind of driveway party today with a new boat. Your dad asked me not to mention it to you, which seemed odd. Everything okay?" A new boat. After the new truck. After the furniture. After the investment opportunity. My fingers trembled so badly I could barely open my Facebook app, where I found what I was looking for on my father's rarely updated page. A photo of him proudly standing beside a used fishing boat, his arm around my mother with the caption, "Finally getting rid of negative influences and enjoying life." Sometimes you need to cut ties to move forward. The cryptic message might have seemed innocent to others, but I knew it was directed at me. With a courage born of betrayal, I called my father directly, prepared to have it out once and for all. When he answered on the 4th ring, his voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. "Sarah, what do you want?" I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Dad, I want to understand what's happening. I gave you everything I had to save your home, and now you're buying boats and trucks and—" He cut me off mid-sentence. "The money's gone, Sarah. Spent. And we don't need your judgment or your conditions anymore." The air left my lungs as if I'd been physically struck. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying don't ever come back. We don't need you anymore. Your mother and I are doing fine without your constant hovering and criticism." I heard my mother's voice in the background, a soft protest quickly shushed. Then she was on the phone, her voice thick with tears. "Sarah, honey, your father's just upset right now. Give him some time." Before she could finish, my father took the phone back. "Your mother agrees with me. This is our life, not yours to control." The call ended abruptly, leaving me standing in my kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear long after the connection died. The following days passed in a fog of betrayal so profound I could hardly function. I called in sick to work for the first time in years, unable to focus on anything beyond the gaping wound where my family relationships had been. Maya came over with ice cream and wine, sitting with me while I cycled through disbelief, rage, and crushing sadness. "They used me," I kept repeating. All these years, I was just their financial backup plan. Maya's kindness only highlighted what real care looked like compared to the conditional support I'd received from my parents. As the initial shock ebbed, a hollow emptiness took its place. Had I ever truly been valued as their daughter, or just as a source of financial support? The childhood memories I'd cherished began to take on darker meanings. My father's proud smiles not for my accomplishments, but for how those achievements might eventually benefit him. My mother's encouragement not for my happiness, but to ensure I'd remain emotionally tethered and available when needed. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, my body physically manifesting the trauma of being discarded by the two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The question that kept me awake night after night wasn't about the money anymore. It was more fundamental and far more painful. Had they ever truly loved me at all? 2 weeks after my father's devastating phone call, I hit rock bottom. My boss called me into her office, gently pointing out that my performance was suffering, clients had complained about unanswered emails, and my team was having to cover for my absences. "Sarah, you've always been one of our strongest managers. Whatever's happening, you need to address it before it affects your career." Her words cut through the fog of my depression. I was on the verge of losing the one area of my life where I'd built something truly my own. That evening, I seriously considered quitting my job, selling everything and moving somewhere nobody knew me. Alaska, maybe, or abroad. My phone pinged with another concerned text from Maya, which I left unanswered like the dozen before it. The breaking point came when I found myself staring at my father's Facebook page at 3 a.m, looking at new photos of him proudly displaying a fish caught from his new boat. Something inside me finally snapped, not toward more anger, but toward recognition that I needed professional help. The next morning, I called the mental health service covered by my company's insurance and scheduled an emergency appointment. Dr. Jensen, a compassionate woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense demeanor, listened without judgment as I poured out the entire story. "What you're describing, Sarah, is a lifetime pattern of emotional manipulation," she said after I'd finished. "Your parents, particularly your father, have been conditioning you to prioritize their needs and wants above your own well-being. That's not what healthy family relationships look like." Over the next few sessions, Dr. Jensen helped me identify patterns I'd normalized: how my parents contacted me primarily when they needed something, how my achievements were valued only when they reflected well on my parents or provided tangible benefits, how my emotional needs were consistently sidelined. "You've been trained to be the parent in this relationship," she explained, "carrying responsibilities that should never have been yours." On my 5th therapy session, a strange coincidence occurred that would change everything. My phone buzzed with a call from an unfamiliar number as I was leaving Dr. Jensen's office. "Ms. Wilson, this is Trevor from Pacific Northwest Banking. I'm calling about the joint account you hold with Frank and Diane Wilson. There seems to be an attempt to remove your name from the account, but we require your signature in person." I thanked him automatically, my mind racing. Why would they need to remove my name unless they were planning something they didn't want me to see? Then Trevor said something that made me stop walking entirely. "While I have you on the line, I should mention that the mortgage payment on the property at 1482 Oak Ridge Lane is coming due next week. Since you're a co-signer on the loan modification we processed recently, I wanted to ensure you're aware." Co-signer. Loan modification. The words echoed in my head. When we'd gone to the bank together to deposit my $20,000 and work out the foreclosure situation, I'd signed multiple documents. At the time, focused on saving my childhood home, I hadn't fully processed the legal implications. The bank representative's call triggered a memory of signing a modification agreement that put the mortgage partially in my name to help my parents qualify for better terms. Later that day, I met with Catherine Reynolds, an attorney specializing in real estate law. Her assessment was clear and startling. "Based on these documents, you have legal claim to approximately 40% of the property. They cannot sell or refinance without your signature, and if they default, you're equally liable for the debt." For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than despair, a flicker of reclaimed power. I wasn't just a victim, I had legal standing. Catherine outlined several options, from forcing a sale to negotiating a settlement. As she spoke, I felt a strange calm replace the chaos of recent weeks. That evening, instead of isolating myself, I invited Maya over, along with 2 colleagues who'd been reaching out, Tom from marketing and Priya from legal. Surrounded by people who genuinely cared about my well-being, I experienced a moment of clarity that Dr. Jensen would later call a breakthrough. I've spent my life trying to buy my parents' love. It's time to invest in myself. The healing wouldn't happen overnight, but with my support system around my kitchen table, I began developing a strategy that wasn't based on emotional reaction, but on self-protection and growth. For the first time since my father's rejection, I slept through the night, waking with purpose rather than pain. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but rather through a series of deliberate steps that gradually shifted the power dynamics that had defined my relationship with my parents for 3 decades. The first change was internal. With Dr. Jensen's guidance, I began recognizing and challenging the deeply ingrained belief that my worth was tied to what I could provide for others. "Your value isn't in your utility to other people, Sarah," she reminded me during sessions, "not even to your parents." At work, I channeled my emotional energy into projects that had been languishing, staying late to catch up on the backlog that had accumulated during my depressive period. My boss noticed the change, assigning me to lead a high-profile initiative to revamp the company's employee wellness program. Ironically, focusing on helping others helped me heal myself. Financially, I created clear boundaries by opening a new account at a different bank, monitoring my credit report weekly, and documenting every transaction related to my parents' home. My attorney, Catherine, drafted a formal letter outlining my legal co-ownership of the property, my expectations regarding financial transparency, and the consequences if those expectations weren't met. When the certified letter arrived at my parents' home, my father's reaction was predictably explosive. His voicemail message reached new heights of vitriol. "How dare you send legal threats to your own family? After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By sicking some fancy lawyer on us?" I listened to the message twice, noting, with a strange detachment, how the old triggers, guilt, shame, the desire to appease, were still present, but no longer controlling my actions. More surprising was my mother's separate call, made while my father was at his weekly poker game. "Sarah, please reconsider this legal approach," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. Can't we just go back to how things were?" For the first time in my life, I didn't rush to soothe her distress. "Mom, how things were wasn't healthy for any of us. Dad took advantage of me financially, and you enabled it. I'm not doing this to hurt you, but to protect myself." Her shocked silence spoke volumes. No one, least of all her daughter, had ever directly called out her role in my father's behavior. "Your silence when Dad mistreats me hurts more than anything he could say," I continued, surprised by my own clarity. "You've always had a choice, Mom, and you've consistently chosen to protect him instead of me." 2 weeks later, I received notification from my bank that my parents had attempted to refinance the house, only to be blocked because my name was on the documents. The annual Wilson family Easter gathering became the unexpected setting for a power shift no one saw coming, least of all me. I declined to attend, but my cousin Jessica called afterward. "You missed major drama. Uncle Rick asked about your absence, and Aunt Linda mentioned seeing your dad's new truck and boat. Someone asked how they could afford all that after nearly losing the house, and your dad made some dismissive comment about ungrateful children." That's when Grandma Jean spoke up. My 78-year-old grandmother, usually a silent presence at family gatherings, had apparently asked point-blank about the money I'd given them. When my father attempted to paint me as controlling and interfering, Grandma Jean, who had raised 5 children on a teacher's salary after my grandfather died young, shut him down completely. "That girl worked herself to the bone to save. You're home while you're out buying toys. Shame on you, Frank. And shame on you too, Diane, for allowing it." The family dynamics shifted that day, with relatives reaching out to me one by one, offering support and, in some cases, sharing similar stories of my father's financial manipulations over the years. The final confrontation happened at a neutral location, a restaurant halfway between Seattle and Portland, requested by my mother but attended by both parents. I arrived prepared with documentation of every financial transaction and legal papers, establishing my ownership stake in the II house. My father started with his usual bluster, but something had changed. Perhaps the family's shifting support, perhaps my own calm certainty, or perhaps simply the realization that his usual tactics no longer worked on me. When he tried to interrupt my methodical presentation of facts, I simply stopped speaking and waited, maintaining eye contact until he fell silent, a technique my therapist had suggested. "I'm not asking for anything that isn't legally mine," I concluded. "I'm not trying to punish you. I'm establishing boundaries that should have existed long ago." My mother, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen her, finally spoke up. "Frank, she's right. What we did with Sarah's money was wrong." In that moment, standing my ground before the two people who had shaped me, for better and worse, I felt a shift in my core sense of self. "I won't set myself on fire to keep others warm anymore," I said, echoing Maya's words that had once seemed so foreign to me. The quiet power in my voice belonged to a woman who had finally recognized her worth, wasn't determined by her usefulness to others, even those who had given her life. 6 months after that restaurant confrontation, the situation resolved in ways I couldn't have predicted. My parents, faced with the legal reality of my co-ownership and the family's shifted support, eventually agreed to sell the house. The real estate market had improved enough that the sale price covered the remaining mortgage with about $95,000 in equity to be divided. My attorney ensured I received both my initial $20,000 and my legal portion of the remaining equity, enough for a modest down payment on a small 2-bedroom craftsman home in a quiet Seattle neighborhood. The day I signed my own mortgage papers, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment untainted by guilt or obligation. "This is yours, earned through your own hard work and strength," Maya said as we clinked glasses on my new front porch. My relationship with my parents underwent a permanent transformation. My father, unable to acknowledge his betrayal or apologize meaningfully, maintained minimal contact, occasional stiff text messages around holidays, never addressing what had happened. I accepted this with a sense of peace that surprised me, recognizing that his limitations weren't my burden to carry. My mother, however, began her own halting journey toward change. Our contact remained limited and structured, Sunday afternoon calls with clear boundaries, but I detected genuine efforts to respect the new dynamics of our relationship. "I'm seeing someone too," she confided during one call, referring to a therapist of her own. "There are patterns I need to understand better." The most unexpected healing came through reconnecting with my younger brother Mark, who had distanced himself from the family years earlier after similar financial conflicts with our father. Living in Colorado with his wife and 2 children, he had created the healthy family environment we both had craved. "I tried to warn you," he said during our first phone call in years, "but I knew you had to see it for yourself." His forgiveness for my years of dismissing his concerns as exaggerations helped me extend the same grace to myself. My friendships deepened as I learned to show vulnerability without shame. Maya remained my steadfast support, but I also welcomed Tom and Priya from work into my inner circle, discovering the joy of relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Even a cautious romance blossomed with David, a kind-eyed architect I met at a community garden project. Though I proceeded slowly, hyper-aware of my tendency to lose myself in others' needs. The most profound healing came through extending my hand to others navigating similar family dynamics. With encouragement from Dr. Jensen, I began co-facilitating a support group for adult children of financially manipulative parents, later expanding to lead financial literacy workshops focused on emotional boundaries around money. "You've turned your wound into wisdom," Dr. Jensen noted in our now monthly check-in sessions. The final chapter of my healing journey came on a crisp autumn day when I visited my childhood home one last time before the new owners took possession. The real estate agent let me walk through the empty rooms alone, saying goodbye to the space that had contained so many complicated memories. In my old bedroom, I carefully removed the growth chart from the doorframe, the one physical memento I wanted to keep. Standing in the backyard under the oak tree that had witnessed my entire childhood, I realized that family isn't always defined by blood or birth. Sometimes family is what we create for ourselves after learning the difficult lessons of what love isn't. As I drove away from Oak Ridge Lane for the final time, I felt neither triumph nor sorrow, but something quieter and more profound, the peace of someone who has finally stopped chasing an impossible ideal and started building something real instead. The $20,000 I had given my parents hadn't purchased what I'd hoped for, their love and appreciation, but it had ultimately bought something far more valuable. My freedom from the endless cycle of giving without boundaries, of loving without reciprocation. Some might see my story as one of loss, but I recognize it now as a necessary reclamation of self-worth that no amount of money could ever purchase. Have you ever had to make difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that establishing healthy boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for your well-being. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to my channel for more authentic life experiences. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it helps anyone struggling with similar family dynamics to find their own path to healing and self-worth.
I'm Megan Davis, 31, and last Sunday my world collapsed over pot roast. "Leave your keys and get out," my father demanded, his voice cold as the untouched mashed potatoes on my plate. "This house belongs to the family now." My mother nodded silently, avoiding my eyes. The property I'd purchased for them 6 months ago, my gift, was apparently no longer mine. I placed the keys on the table and left quietly, despite knowing I was still legally the owner. Something had been off with my parents lately, but I never saw it coming. If you're watching from somewhere dealing with family financial drama, hit like and subscribe. Trust me, You'll want to hear how I handled what happened the next morning when the mortgage company called. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Seattle, where my parents, Robert and Susan Davis, raised 3 children on my father's teacher salary and my mother's part-time bookkeeping income. We weren't poor, but money was always discussed in hushed, worried tones at our kitchen table after we kids went to bed. I learned early that financial security wasn't a given, it was something you built carefully, deliberately. While my siblings Ryan and Heather seemed content with average grades and plenty of social time, I buried myself in books and part-time jobs. By 16, I was managing a coffee shop on weekends. At 18, I received a partial scholarship to the University of Washington, covering the rest with 3 simultaneous jobs. I graduated with a business degree, 0 debt, and an entry-level position at a real estate investment firm. You work too hard, my mother would say during our weekly calls. There's more to life than money, Megan. But it wasn't about money. It was about independence. I'd watched how financial stress had etched permanent worry lines into my parents' faces. I wanted different for myself, and ironically, for them too. Over 8 years, I climbed from assistant to associate to partner. I specialized in identifying undervalued properties, renovating them, and either selling for profit or maintaining them as income properties. By 30, my portfolio included 12 properties and a reputation as one of Seattle's sharpest young investors. My siblings took different paths. Ryan, 2 years younger, bounced between bartending jobs, always with big plans that never materialized. Heather, the youngest at 26, worked as a preschool teacher, steady but always struggling with student loans. My parents helped them both financially, repeatedly. Ryan needed bail money after a DUI. Heather needed first and last month's rent, then car repairs, then dental work. They're still finding themselves, Mom would explain when I questioned these bailouts. Not everyone knows their path as early as you did. I never received financial help after college, nor did I ask for it. Instead, I became the family success story, mentioned proudly at neighborhood barbecues, but with an undercurrent of something else, something that felt increasingly like resentment. 6 months ago, when my parents' landlord decided to sell the modest house they'd rented for 15 years, I saw an opportunity. Their lease was ending, rents were skyrocketing in Seattle, and they were approaching retirement age with inadequate savings. I want to buy you a house, I told them over dinner. Not just any house, the one you've always talked about. They'd spent years driving through the Queen and neighborhood, pointing out a particular craftsman-style home with a wraparound porch and garden space. Through an industry contact, I learned it was coming on the market. At $780,000, it was a stretch even for me, but I made it work. The day I handed them the keys, my mother cried, and my father hugged me for the first time in years. We never thought we'd have something like this, he said, voice breaking. I arranged a mortgage under my name, but set up a bank account for them to transfer a token rent amount each month, far below market rate, just enough to give them dignity and ownership in the process. We agreed they'd live there as long as they wanted, and someday, when they no longer needed it, we'd decide together what to do with it. For 3 months, everything seemed perfect. Sunday dinners became a tradition in their new dining room. My mother planted the garden she'd always wanted. My father claimed the basement as his workshop. Then things began to shift. First, it was small comments. "This is really the family home now," my mother would say when giving neighbors tours. Not Megan's generous gift, or the house our daughter bought us, but our family home. My father started making renovation decisions without consulting me, despite our agreement about major changes. Ryan and Heather began spending more time there, which initially seemed positive. The house was bringing our somewhat distant family together. But I noticed whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. My siblings had keys made without asking me. Ryan brought a girlfriend who stayed for weeks in the guest room I occasionally used. For weeks ago, I stopped by unannounced and overheard my father on the phone. "No, the house is completely paid for. No mortgage at all." A blatant lie that made my stomach twist. When questioned, he brushed it off as simplifying things for an old friend. 2 weeks ago, I discovered mail addressed to me had been opened, mortgage statements and property tax notices. When confronted, my mother claimed, "We thought these were joint documents since we live here." 1 week ago, Ryan asked if I would co-sign a business loan for a guaranteed opportunity. When I declined, suggesting he build credit first, his response was telling, "You have this whole house you're not even using. You can spare some credit for family." The signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. Last Sunday began like many others. I arrived at my parents' house, technically my house, at 3 p.m., carrying a bottle of wine and a bakery cheesecake. Mom greeted me with her usual hug, though it felt perfunctory. "Everyone's already here," she said, leading me to the dining room where my father was carving a roast. Ryan and Heather sat at the table, along with Ryan's latest girlfriend, Brittany, whom I'd only met twice. Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim stopped by too, Mom added, gesturing to my father's sister and her husband sitting awkwardly in the living room. They rarely attended our family dinners. "Nice surprise," I said, though something felt off. Carol avoided eye contact, focusing intensely on arranging napkins that were already perfectly placed. The conversation during dinner remained superficial: neighborhood news, Seattle's endless rain, Brittany's new job at a downtown bar. Ryan seemed unusually interested in my work. "So how many properties do you own now, Meg?" he asked, pouring his third glass of wine. 12 income properties, plus my apartment and this house," I answered, noticing how he flinched at the words "this house." "Must be nice," Heather muttered. Dad cleared his throat. "Speaking of this house, we've been thinking about making some changes." "What kind of changes?" I asked, setting down my fork. "The upstairs bathroom needs renovation," Mom interjected quickly. "And we're thinking about converting the attic into another bedroom." "That's a big project," I said carefully. "We should discuss the budget and—" "We don't need your permission for every little thing," Ryan interrupted. "It's their house." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Even Brittany looked down at her plate. "Actually," I said gently, "legally it is my house. I'm happy to discuss renovations, but—" "That's exactly the problem," my father said, his voice rising. "Always reminding us whose house it really is." "Dad, I didn't mean—" "We know what you meant," he continued, pushing his plate away. "You give with one hand and control with the other. You've done it your whole life." My mother touched his arm. "Robert, maybe after dinner." "No, Susan. It's time." He turned back to me. "Your mother and I have discussed this with the family. This constant power dynamic isn't working." "Power dynamic?" I repeated, genuinely confused. "I bought this house as a gift. I've never tried to control how you live here. You make us pay rent." Ryan exclaimed. "A token amount that's about a quarter of market rate," I countered, feeling heat rise in my face. "The point is," my father continued, "this should be a family home. Your grandparents helped us when we were starting out. That's what family does." "I know, and that's why I bought." "You bought it to show off," Heather interrupted. "To remind everyone how successful you are while the rest of us struggle." I looked around the table, stunned. Even Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim were nodding slightly. "That's not true," I said, my voice barely audible. "I bought it because I love you." "If you loved us," my father said, "you'd put the house in our names. Let it be truly ours." The demand hung in the air. I thought about the $780,000 mortgage in my name, the property taxes, the insurance, all my responsibility. The legal implications of transferring ownership were enormous. "Dad, I can't just sign over a house. There are mortgages, legal issues." "There's always an excuse with you," my mother said, surprising me with her sudden sharpness. "Always conditions." My father reached into his pocket and pulled out papers. "We've already contacted a lawyer. These transfer documents just need your signature." I skimmed the papers, my hand trembling. They wanted me to sign over complete ownership while keeping the mortgage in my name. This isn't legally sound, I said. I'd be responsible for a loan on property I don't own. There it is, Ryan sneered. Always about the money. It's not about money, I insisted. It's about fairness. About reality. I've given you a place to live rent-free for all practical purposes. And lord it over us at every opportunity, my father said, standing suddenly. We're done with your charity. We're done with your conditions. He walked to the drawer of the antique hutch I'd helped my mother select, pulled out a set of papers, and slammed them on the table. We've already applied for a home equity loan. The house has substantial equity we can access. I felt the blood drain from my face. You can't take out a loan on a house you don't own. We've lived here for 6 months, my mother said. We've established residency. The loan officer said. The loan officer is mistaken, I interrupted, my professional knowledge kicking in despite my emotional turmoil. And attempting to take out a loan on property you don't own is fraud. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. My father's face reddened. Leave your keys and get out, he demanded, voice shaking. This house belongs to the family now. My mother nodded in agreement, eyes cold. I could have argued, could have reminded them of the legal realities, could have threatened. Instead, I placed my house keys on the table, keys to a property legally still mine, and stood up. I love you all, I said quietly. I always have. I never thought my success would become something you'd resent rather than celebrate. No one spoke as I collected my purse and jacket. As I reached the door, Aunt Carol finally spoke. Your parents deserve security in their retirement, Megan. After all they've done for you. I turned back one last time. I bought this house to give them exactly that security. I never expected gratitude, but I also never expected this. I drove home in silence, tears blurring the familiar Seattle streets. The rain started halfway home, matching the storm inside me. Monday morning, I woke to my phone vibrating on my nightstand. Groggy and emotionally drained, I almost ignored it. The caller ID showed Pacific Northwest Mortgage. Ms. Davis, a professional voice greeted me. This is Thomas Wilson from Pacific Northwest Mortgage. I'm calling about some unusual activity on your Queen and property account. I sat up, instantly alert. What kind of activity? We received paperwork attempting to transfer the title while maintaining the loan in your name, followed by an application for a home equity line of credit for $500,000. My stomach dropped. I didn't authorize either of those. We suspected as much, Thomas continued. The signatures didn't match our records, and the procedure being attempted isn't standard or legal. We've flagged it in our system. What exactly did they apply for? I asked, pacing my apartment. The application stated intent to access the equity for family distribution and home improvements. Red flags appeared immediately in our fraud detection system. After ending the call, I contacted Lindsay Moore, a real estate attorney who had handled several of my investment properties. They did what? Lindsay exclaimed after I explained the situation. Megan, that's mortgage fraud and forgery. Those are serious crimes. I know, I said, my voice breaking. But they're my family. Family or not, you need to protect yourself, Lindsay advised. I'm sending over a ceasing and desist letter to prevent further attempts. Meanwhile, gather all documentation related to the property. I spent the morning in a daze, pulling together mortgage statements, the deed, tax records, and our informal rental agreement. Around noon, my phone lit up with a text from Heather. You called the mortgage company? Mom and Dad are freaking out. Way to escalate things. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to my parents' neighborhood, parking a block away. I needed to understand what they'd been planning without my knowledge. While they were typically out on Monday afternoons, Dad at his chess club, Mom at her book group, I used my spare key to enter. I felt strange, like an intruder in a property I legally owned. In the home office, I found what I was looking for. A folder labeled House Documents contained multiple disturbing items. 1. Printouts of home equity loan information. 2. Notes about distribution with amounts allocated to each family member. Robert and Susan, parents, $200,000. Ryan, $150,000. Heather, $100,000. Home improvements, $50,000. 3. A practice sheet with attempts to copy my signature. 4. A letter from a different mortgage company declining their application. 5. Printouts of state residency laws, highlighted sections suggesting tenants could claim ownership after 6 months, a complete misinterpretation of adverse possession laws. Most shocking was a chain of family emails I found open on my father's computer. The conversation had begun 3 months ago, just weeks after they'd moved in. Ryan, did Megan mention how much equity is in the house already? Dad, she put down almost 30%. That's money just sitting there doing nothing. Heather, do you think she'd loan against it to help with my student loans? Mom, she already said no to Ryan's business loan. She's become so selfish with her money. Ryan, it's not like she lives there. We could get a family loan without even telling her. Dad, let me look into our options. The conversation evolved over weeks, from asking me for money, to discussing how to access the equity without me, to planning the Sunday dinner confrontation. In one message, Ryan had written, I accessed her laptop last month when she was helping Mom in the garden. Her banking password was saved. The house isn't her only asset. She's sitting on over $1 million in investments while I can barely make rent. I felt physically ill. While I helped Mom plant her dream garden, my brother had been violating my privacy, my trust. The final email was from yesterday evening, after I'd left. Dad, dinner didn't go as planned. Megan left the keys, but I'm worried about the legal implications she mentioned. Ryan, she's bluffing. I've already spoken to a guy who says occupancy establishes rights. Heather, should we change the locks? And Carol, my friend's daughter, had a similar situation. After 6 months, the property was considered abandoned to the residents. It was all based on misunderstandings of property law, but the intent was clear. They'd been planning to essentially steal my house and use its equity as a family piggy bank. As I was reading, I heard the front door open. Hastily, I took photos of the documents with my phone and slipped out the back door, making it to my car just as my father's sedan pulled into the driveway. Back at my apartment, I searched my laptop for any signs of intrusion. Sure enough, my password manager showed logins to my banking and investment accounts from dates when I wasn't at my parents' house. I changed all my passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, and then sat on my balcony overlooking Elliott Bay, trying to process the betrayal. My phone rang constantly that evening, calls from my parents, Ryan, even Aunt Carol. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages ranged from angry accusations to tearful pleading, but none acknowledged what they'd tried to do. Instead of responding, I listened to the final voicemail repeatedly. Megan, it's Mom. I don't understand why you're making such a big deal about this. All we want is financial security. After all we've done for you, raising you, supporting you, this house should be our retirement plan. You have so much already. Don't be selfish, honey. Family shares. Those last 2 words echoed in my mind. Family shares. But sharing, I realized, shouldn't mean taking. It shouldn't mean forgery, fraud, and betrayal. By Tuesday morning, I had 27 missed calls and 42 text messages. Finally, I decided to answer when my mother called again. Megan, finally. Your father and I have been worried sick. Have you? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Of course. You disappeared after dinner and then called the mortgage company? How could you do that to us? I took a deep breath. Mom, you and Dad tried to transfer my property and take out a fraudulent loan. The mortgage company called me. It's not fraudulent if it's family, she insisted. This is what families do for each other. Forge signatures? Access accounts without permission? Plan behind each other's backs. Don't be dramatic, she sighed. We raised you for 18 years. We paid for your food, your clothes, your first car. You think that was free? The implication stunned me. Are you saying I owe you for raising me? All children owe their parents, she stated as if it were obvious. In our day, children took care of their parents in old age. It was expected. I am taking care of you, I said. That's why I bought you a house. But you keep control, my father interjected, apparently on speakerphone. Real support means trusting us to make our own decisions. Like defrauding a mortgage company? See? This is why we had to take matters into our own hands, he said. You always think you know better than everyone else. I closed my eyes, trying to stay calm. Dad, what were you planning to do with the equity money? A pause. Home improvements. Retirement security. And Ryan's portion? And Heather's. Another pause. Family helps family. Your brother has a business opportunity. Your sister has student loans. So you were planning to pull equity from my house to give cash to my siblings? Our house, my mother corrected. And yes, that's what families do. You have plenty of money, Megan. You wouldn't even miss it. That's not the point. The point is, my father interrupted, you've become selfish. Success has changed you. You used to understand family obligations. Before I could respond, my phone beeped with another call, Ryan. I need to go, I said. Don't you dare hang up on us, my father warned. We're not finished discussing this. But I ended the call, switching to Ryan's. How could you? He started immediately. Mom and Dad are devastated. How could I? How could you access my laptop and bank accounts without permission? I was just trying to understand our family's financial situation, he defended. By committing identity theft? By planning to steal equity from my property. It's not stealing if it's family, he echoed our mother's sentiment. And it's not like you need the money. You have what, 12 properties? Meanwhile, I'm trying to start a business with no support. I worked for everything I have, Ryan. No one gave it to me. He scoffed. You got lucky in real estate. Some of us haven't had the same opportunities. We grew up in the same household. Yeah, but Mom and Dad pushed you to succeed. They focused everything on you, the golden child. Heather and I never got the same attention. This revisionist history was news to me. That's not how I remember it. Of course not. You were too busy becoming successful, Megan, to notice the rest of us struggling. Before I could respond, my phone beeped again, Heather this time. The pattern repeated. Each family member called to express their disappointment in me, each justified their actions as appropriate because family, and each implied I was selfish for having financial boundaries. Aunt Carol called last. In my day, she lectured, family property was family property. Your grandmother gave your father and me our first house. She gave it to you, I clarified. She didn't let you take out loans against her property without her knowledge. Details she dismissed. The point is, family takes care of family. Your parents won't live forever, Megan. That house will be yours again someday. What's the harm in letting them access some equity now when they need it? The harm is in the dishonesty, I said. In the forged signatures. In the broken trust. By Wednesday, the calls shifted from family to extended contacts. My mother's book club friends texted to express disappointment in my abandonment of my parents. My father's former colleagues called to mediate the situation. Even my high school volleyball coach reached out, having heard I was denying my parents' retirement security. The narrative had spread, twisted. Selfish Megan, withholding resources from her struggling family. Ungrateful Megan, forgetting her parents' sacrifices. No mention of the forgery. No mention of the unauthorized loan application. No mention of the privacy violations. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment, truly alone for the first time in my life. Family had always been my foundation, my motivation for success. Now that foundation was revealed to be built on expectations I'd never agreed to, obligations I'd never undertaken. I cycled through emotions. Betrayal, anger, grief, doubt. Was I truly selfish? Was financial independence incompatible with family loyalty? Around midnight, my phone lit up with a text from Heather. Mom's crying herself to sleep every night. I hope you're happy. I wasn't happy. I was heartbroken. But beneath the heartbreak, a new emotion was forming: resolve. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect, honesty, and healthy boundaries. And it was time to establish all three. Thursday morning, I called into work, requesting personal days for the remainder of the week. As a partner, I rarely took time off, and my assistant Janet sounded concerned. Everything okay, Megan? Family situation, I explained vaguely. I need some time to handle it. Take what you need, she assured me. The Anderson portfolio review can wait till Monday. With work temporarily set aside, I drove to Lindsay Moore's law office in downtown Seattle. The rain had finally stopped, leaving behind that fresh, clean scent that momentarily made everything feel possible. Lindsay greeted me with a hug and coffee in her corner office overlooking the Sound. I've reviewed everything, she said, gesturing to the documentation I'd sent her yesterday. Your family has no legal claim to the property. The mortgage is in your name, the deed is in your name, and the rental agreement they signed acknowledges your ownership. So legally, I'm protected? Absolutely. But Megan, she leaned forward, this isn't just a legal issue. It's a family crisis. I nodded, throat tight. I know. You have several options, Lindsay continued. 1, you could press charges for the forgery and attempted fraud. 2, you could evict them. They violated the terms of your rental agreement. 3, you could sell the property and remove the temptation entirely. None of those options felt right. Despite everything, I couldn't imagine pressing charges against my parents or making them homeless. What about option 4? I asked. Establishing clear boundaries while preserving the relationship? Lindsay smiled sadly. That's the hardest option, but yes, it's possible. It requires both parties to want it, though. We spent the next hour outlining a structured approach. Lindsay drafted a new, formal lease agreement with clear terms. We documented the forgery evidence, not to press charges, but to have as leverage if needed. She connected me with a financial therapist who specialized in family money dynamics. Money amplifies existing relationship patterns, Lindsay explained. It rarely creates new ones. Whatever dysfunction existed in your family before is just being magnified by your success. From Lindsay's office, I went directly to meet Grace Williams, my first mentor in real estate and the closest thing I had to a second mother. At 68, Grace had navigated her own family financial dramas and emerged with both boundaries and relationships intact. We met at her favorite cafe near Green Lake, where she listened without interruption to the whole sordid story. I'm not surprised, she finally said, stirring her tea. I've seen this pattern dozens of times. You have? Of course. First-generation wealth creators often face this. Your success challenges your family's narrative about themselves, about money, about what's possible. It's easier to vilify your boundaries than examine their own choices. But what do? I asked, feeling like a new investor again, seeking her wisdom. You stand firm, she said simply. Not cruel, not vindictive, but firm. This isn't about the house anymore, Megan. It's about teaching people how to treat you. I'm afraid I'll lose them, I admitted, voice breaking. Grace reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You might, temporarily. But what's the alternative? Letting them take advantage of you forever? That's not love from either side. That afternoon, I met with Dr. Alan Peters, the financial therapist Lindsay had recommended. His office felt warm, non-judgmental, a space where I could finally acknowledge the complicated emotions swirling inside me. You're experiencing financial abuse, he stated after hearing my story. It's particularly difficult to recognize when it comes from family because we're conditioned to believe family is always acting in our best interest. They think they are, I defended automatically. They believe family resources should be shared. But only in one direction, it seems, he observed. Has your brother offered to share his future business profits with you? Has your sister offered to help when she's more financially stable? I hadn't considered that. The sharing my family envisioned flowed only toward them, never outward. Your generation often faces this, Dr. Peters continued. Baby boomer parents who expected traditional financial support in old age, confronting children who must build financial independence in a different economic landscape. We discussed strategies for the confrontation I knew was coming. Role-playing difficult conversations. Identifying my emotional triggers. Preparing for manipulation tactics. They'll try to make you feel guilty, he warned. They'll bring up childhood sacrifices, question your love, possibly threaten to cut you off emotionally. Are you prepared for that? No, I answered honestly. But I need to be. By Friday, my plan was taking shape. I spent the day securing my financial accounts further, collecting documentation, and preparing the property for possible outcomes. I changed the locks, documented the current condition with photos, and backed up evidence of the forgery attempts to multiple secure locations. I also built my support system. I called friends I'd neglected while building my career, reconnected with colleagues who'd faced similar situations, and even joined an online support group for first-generation wealth builders navigating family expectations. You're not alone in this, my friend Diane assured me over dinner. My parents remortgaged their house to give my brother startup money, lost everything, and then expected me to buy them a new house because I had extra. What did you do? I asked. I helped them find an affordable rental and set boundaries. They didn't speak to me for 6 months. Now we have a better relationship than ever because it's built on honesty, not exploitation. That night, I wrote out my non-negotiables. 1. The house remains legally mine. 2. No unauthorized loan applications or equity access. 3. Formal lease agreement with market-appropriate terms. 4. Financial counseling for the entire family. 5. Complete transparency about finances going forward. 6. Acknowledgement of an apology for the violation of trust. I also defined what I was willing to offer. 1. Continued below-market rent. 2. Help establishing retirement accounts for my parents. 3. Financial education resources for my siblings. 4. A structured way to address genuine family financial emergencies. 5. Family therapy to rebuild trust. By Sunday morning, 1 week after the disastrous dinner, I felt prepared. Not confident, not eager, but prepared. I texted my parents. I'll be at the house at 2 p.m. to discuss the situation. Please have Ryan and Heather there. I'm coming with solutions, not accusations. I hope you are willing to listen. My father's response was immediate. This is our home. You come on our terms, not yours. I stood firm. This is my property. I'm offering an opportunity to resolve this respectfully. 2 p.m. At 1:58 p.m., I parked outside the house I'd purchased with such hope and love just 6 months earlier. In my briefcase were 2 sets of documents, the legal enforcement papers Lindsay had prepared, and the reconciliation agreement I hoped we wouldn't need. Taking a deep breath, I walked up the path to the front door, ready to reclaim not just my property rights, but my self-respect. When I knocked on the door of my own property at precisely 2 p.m., my mother answered, her expression a mixture of defensiveness and uncertainty. You changed the locks, she accused immediately. Yes, I acknowledged, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. After discovering attempted fraud on my property, it seemed prudent. The living room had been arranged like an intervention, my father in his armchair, Ryan and Heather on the couch, even Aunt Carol perched on a dining chair dragged in for the occasion. Their postures were defensive, arms crossed, faces set. We're all here as you demanded, my father said. Though I don't appreciate being summoned in my own home. I placed my briefcase on the coffee table. First, let's clarify something. This is legally my home. I own it. I hold the mortgage. I pay the property taxes and insurance. These are facts, not opinions. Megan, my mother began. Please let me finish, I said firmly. I've listened to everyone's calls and messages this week. Now it's my turn to speak. To my surprise, they fell silent. 1 week ago, you demanded I surrender ownership of this house. When I declined, you attempted to forge my signature on transfer documents and loan applications. You accessed my private financial accounts without permission. You planned to extract $500,000 in equity and distribute it among yourselves. That's not exactly Ryan started. I have the evidence. I cut him off, patting my briefcase. Documented, copied, and safely stored with my attorney. What you attempted constitutes forgery, fraud, and identity theft. These are felonies, not family disagreements. The color drained from my mother's face. My father's jaw tightened. Are you threatening us? He demanded. I'm stating facts, I replied calmly. I have 2 paths forward in this briefcase. The first involves legal enforcement, criminal charges, eviction proceedings, and restraining orders. Heather gasped. Aunt Carol muttered something under her breath. The second path, I continued, involves reconciliation, boundaries, and rebuilding trust. That's the path I prefer, but it requires acknowledgement of wrongdoing and commitment to change from all of you. So you're giving us ultimatums now? Ryan scoffed. I'm offering choices with clear consequences, I corrected. Something that's been missing from our family dynamic. I opened my briefcase and removed the reconciliation agreement. This document outlines a path forward. You continue living here under a formal lease agreement at below market rent. The property remains legally mine, but I commit to maintaining it as your home. In exchange, you acknowledge the boundary violations, agree to financial counseling, and commit to transparency going forward. Financial counseling, my father repeated incredulously. We're not children. Children don't commit forgery, I pointed out. This isn't punishment. It's protection for all of us. The counseling helps us develop healthy financial boundaries and communication. My mother took the agreement, skimming it with growing dismay. You want us to pay more rent? She asked, pointing to a clause. Yes, still 40% below market rate, but enough to establish a proper landlord-tenant relationship. The token amount was clearly insufficient to establish respect for boundaries. Ryan stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're punishing us for trying to access resources that should belong to the family anyway. I've provided resources, I said evenly. A home worth nearly $800,000. Below market rent. Security in retirement that you wouldn't otherwise have. What I haven't provided is unlimited access to my assets or permission to commit crimes in my name. Always about the money with you, he muttered. No, I corrected. Always about respect. About honesty. About trust. The very things this family seems to have forgotten. My father hadn't spoken, his face unreadable as he studied the agreement. And if we refuse, he finally asked. I took a deep breath. Then I'll be forced to pursue the legal option. I don't want that, Dad. It would devastate me to press charges against my own family. But I will not allow myself to be exploited, even by people I love. You'd really do that, my mother whispered. Send your own parents to jail? You were really willing to commit fraud against your own daughter? I countered. The room fell silent. For perhaps the first time, they were confronting the reality of what they'd attempted. Heather was the first to crack. I didn't know about the forgery, she said quietly. I knew about accessing equity, but not about faking your signature. That was Ryan's idea, my father admitted, throwing my brother under the bus without hesitation. Ryan exploded. Are you serious? It was your idea. You said Megan would never notice if we... He stopped abruptly, realizing what he was confessing. This blame shifting is exactly the problem, I interjected. Everyone was willing to participate in taking from me, but no one wants responsibility. My mother began to cry, soft hiccuping sobs that normally would have melted my resolve. I steeled myself against the manipulation. I didn't raise you to be so cold, she said between sobs. You raised me to be independent and responsible, I corrected. I'm simply expecting the same from my family. And Carol, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. Robert, Susan, the girl has a point. What you did, what we encouraged, wasn't right. My father's head snapped up in surprise. Carol, I got caught up in it too, she admitted. The resentment, the entitlement. But attempting forgery? That crosses a line we weren't raised to cross. Her unexpected support shifted something in the room. My father's rigid posture softened slightly. We were desperate, he said quietly. Retirement looming, inadequate savings, medical bills. You could have talked to me, I said, my own voice softening. Asked for help directly instead of trying to take it. I've never refused reasonable requests. You refused Ryan's business loan, my mother pointed out. Because it wasn't a sound investment, I replied. I said no to a specific request, not to helping generally. Slowly, painfully, we began to talk, really talk. About money, yes, but more importantly about expectations, assumptions, and the unspoken resentments that had been building for years. My success had made them feel inadequate. Their financial struggles had made me feel responsible. We'd all been operating from scripts we'd never consciously examined. After 2 hours of difficult conversation, Ryan stormed out, unwilling to accept the new reality. Heather, however, stayed, gradually moving from defensive to contemplative. I was jealous, she finally admitted. You make everything look so easy. It wasn't easy, I told her. It was hard work, careful planning, and sacrifices you never saw. My father, proudest and therefore most resistant, eventually sighed deeply. I don't like these terms, he said, tapping the agreement. But I understand why they're necessary. They're not punishment, I reiterated. They're the foundation for rebuilding trust. By evening, we had a tentative agreement. My parents would remain in the house under the new lease terms. They would attend financial counseling. We would have monthly family meetings about money expectations and boundaries. What about Ryan? My mother worried. His choices are his own, I said. The door remains open when he's ready to respect boundaries. As I prepared to leave, my father stopped me at the door. I was wrong, he said simply, the words clearly costing him. Not just about the forgery, but about what I said last week. Your success isn't something to punish you for. It's something I should have celebrated more. It wasn't a complete resolution. Trust wouldn't be rebuilt overnight. But it was a start. As I drove home that evening, I felt lighter. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. But because I'd finally stood up for myself in the most important relationship arena of all, family. The hardest boundaries to set are often the most necessary ones. 6 months have passed since that confrontational Sunday. Spring has given way to summer, then fall, and Seattle prepares for another rain-soaked winter. The physical seasons mirror the emotional ones our family has weathered, turbulent change followed by tentative new growth. The first month after our confrontation was the hardest. My parents adhered to the letter of our agreement, but struggled with the spirit. Financial counseling sessions were attended with minimal participation. Rent was paid exactly on the due date, not a day earlier. Our monthly family meetings felt stilted, formal. Ryan remained distant, refusing to sign the agreement or acknowledge any wrongdoing. Call me when you stop being a dictator, was his parting text. It hurt, but I recognized the deflection for what it was, easier to blame me than examine his own behavior. Heather surprised me. Once the initial defensiveness faded, she engaged genuinely with the process. During our third family meeting, she brought a personal budget for review, asking for feedback rather than handouts. I've been thinking about what you said, she admitted over coffee one rainy afternoon. About working for what you have. I've applied to a master's program in education administration. It would mean better pay, more security. That's wonderful, I told her sincerely. I can't afford it without loans, she continued, but I'm not asking you to pay. I just wanted you to know I'm trying. That conversation marked a turning point. Not because Heather was pursuing education, though I was proud of her for that, but because she was taking responsibility for her choices without expecting rescue. By the third month, subtle shifts appeared in my parents' behavior too. The financial counselor reported increased engagement. My father began researching part-time consulting work to supplement his retirement. My mother started a small bookkeeping service for neighborhood businesses. The counselor helped us realize we were living in fear, my mother confessed during our July family meeting. Fear of not having enough. Fear of dependency. We projected that fear onto you, making it your responsibility. We should have planned better, my father acknowledged. Depending on our children wasn't fair to any of you. These admissions weren't easy for them. A lifetime of financial anxiety doesn't disappear with a few counseling sessions. But acknowledgement was the first step toward change. In August, something remarkable happened. My parents made their rent payment with a note. We've calculated the market rate for comparable properties. The difference between what we pay and market value is approximately $1,200 monthly. We're depositing this amount into a separate account to eventually repay you for your generosity. They didn't need to do this. I hadn't asked for it. But their voluntary acknowledgement of my contribution meant more than the money ever could. Ryan's journey back took longer. In September, I received a text, "Can we talk?" We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. He looked thinner, tired. My business venture failed, he admitted without preamble. The investor pulled out. I waited, wondering if this was leading to another request for money. You were right to refuse co-signing, he continued, surprising me. The numbers never made sense. I just wanted a shortcut. What will you do now? I asked cautiously. I've taken a management position at Kelsey's Restaurant Group. Entry-level, but stable. Health insurance, for 401k matching. It wasn't an explicit apology, but from Ryan, this acknowledgement was significant progress. I'm still angry, he admitted. Not really at you anymore, but at myself. For expecting rescue instead of building something on my own. It's never too late to start, I told him. He didn't sign the family agreement that day, but he did come to the October family meeting. Progress comes in small steps. Throughout these months, I've been on my own journey. The betrayal had shaken my foundation, forcing me to examine my relationship with success, money, and family obligation. With Dr. Peter's guidance, I recognized my own unhealthy patterns. I'd used financial success as a substitute for emotional connection, providing materially where I struggled to connect personally. My parents' betrayal hurt so deeply because the house represented love I couldn't express in other ways. This realization led to changes in my professional life too. I began mentoring younger women in real estate investment, sharing not just technical knowledge, but emotional wisdom about boundaries and family expectations. I created a workshop called First Generation Wealth, Navigating Family Dynamics, which I now present quarterly. The response has been overwhelming. So many others walking the same path, facing the same challenges. Last month, I finalized a new arrangement for my parents' home. We established a formal trust that provides them lifetime residency while protecting my investment. The agreement includes provisions for home maintenance, eventual disposition, and clear boundaries around equity access. This feels fair, my father said after reviewing the documents with their own attorney. Secure for us, protected for you. Yesterday, we celebrated Thanksgiving in that house, the first holiday where money tensions didn't simmer beneath the surface. The conversation flowed naturally, with genuine interest in each other's lives beyond financial matters. After dinner, my mother pulled me aside. I never properly apologized, she said softly, for what we tried to do, for betraying your trust. It's behind us now, I assured her. No, it needs to be said. We were wrong, Megan. Completely wrong. Not just legally, but morally. I'm so sorry we put our fear above our integrity, above our love for you. The words washed over me like healing rain. As I look toward the future, I carry powerful lessons from this painful chapter. True generosity comes with boundaries, not conditions. Without boundaries, giving becomes depletion, not generosity. Financial success doesn't exempt you from family dysfunction, it often magnifies it, forcing issues into the open that might otherwise remain hidden. Money is never just about money. It's about values, power, security, and worth. When conflicts arise around money, the deeper issue is rarely financial. Most importantly, I've learned that standing firm in your boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential. Not just for your protection, but for the health of the relationship itself. Without boundaries, respect cannot flourish. My family's story isn't a perfect resolution. Ryan still struggles with resentment. My parents still worry about retirement. I still navigate the complex emotions of betrayal and forgiveness. But we're building something stronger than what we had before, a relationship based on honesty, respect, and appropriate boundaries rather than unspoken expectations and resentment. If you're facing similar challenges with family and finances, remember that you're not alone. Setting boundaries with family is the hardest emotional work you'll ever do, but also the most necessary. Your success is not an obligation to sacrifice your boundaries. Your love for family doesn't require enabling harmful behavior. Have you experienced financial pressure from family? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe. There's so much more to discuss about navigating these complex waters. Share this with someone who might need permission to set their own boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, love and boundaries aren't opposites. They're complements. One cannot truly exist without the other.